Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I work as a dispatcher for a small public utility company based in Moab, Utah. My name is Tanner Briggs. For nearly 8 years, I've been working night routes, checking transformer stations in San Juan and Grand counties. The job is easy. I go out to remote equipment sites, inspect the meters, record the readings, reset the circuit breakers if they trip, and report back to headquarters. Most nights I see more rabbits than people. The sky is magnificent. The roads are empty. The silence there is the kind that bothers city dwellers, but it's the kind that helps me fall asleep quickly when I get home. I know every dirt road between Blanding and Moab. I know which substation is louder than the others and which switches will fail during the monsoon season. I know the smell of transformer oil on hot nights and the sound my truck makes when I exceed 70 miles per hour on Highway 191. This is my country. I grew up in Monticello. In the fall, I go hunting near the La Salle Mountains. When my girlfriend Haley is off work at the clinic in Bluff, we camp along the San Juan River. We've built a small, quiet life, just as we imagined it. What I'm about to tell you happened over 3 nights in late August. The temperature was still pushing into the high 90s during the day, but at night the air would drop fast once the sun cleared the horizon. That's high desert for you. You go from sweating through your shirt to needing a jacket in the span of 2 hours. The sky turns colors you don't see anywhere else, deep oranges that fade to purple, and then to black so complete you can see the arch of the Milky Way without trying. On the first night, I left the yard in Moab just after 9 p.m. I had 6 sites to check between town and a remote station near the turnoff to Hanksville. The route takes about 4 hours, if I don't stop for anything but work. I grabbed coffee at the gas station on Main Street, checked my clipboard, and rolled north on US 191 with the windows down and the radio on low. Classic rock station out of Grand Junction. The signal fades past the state line, but it holds long enough to keep me company through the empty stretches. The first 3 sites were clean. Normal readings, no faults, no issues. I logged the numbers in my book and kept moving. By 11:30, I was on Highway 24 heading west toward Hanksville. The road out there is straight for long sections. Then it curves through low washes and climbs over ridges of slick rock that glow white under headlights. You pass almost no one. Maybe a camper van. Maybe a rancher heading home late. That night, I had the highway to myself. I crested a rise near the turnoff to Goblin Valley and saw it for the first time. A thin blue line appeared in the sky above the southern horizon. It wasn't a star. It wasn't a plane. It was a perfectly horizontal line of light, pale blue like a welding arc but softer. It hung above the dark ridge of the San Rafael swell and didn't move. I slowed the truck and leaned forward to get a better angle through the windshield. The line stayed fixed. It didn't pulse. It didn't flicker. It just sat there against the black like someone had drawn it with a ruler and a bright pen. I've seen plenty of strange things in the desert sky. Meteors that leave long trails. Satellites drifting slow and steady. Military jets out of Hill Air Force Base that scream overhead without warning. I've even seen ball lightning once during a summer storm near Cisco. This wasn't any of those. This was a line. Clean edges. No variation. And it sat in a place where no aircraft should be holding position. I watched it for maybe 30 seconds. Then it blinked out. Not a fade, just gone. One moment it was there. The next moment the sky was empty again. I marked the time in my book. 11:47 p.m. I wrote blue line, southern sky, horizontal, 30 seconds, and kept driving. I told myself it was a drone with LEDs or some kind of atmospheric refraction I didn't understand. I didn't call it in. There wasn't anything to report beyond a light I couldn't explain. The substation near Hanksville sat at the end of a gravel road that splits off Highway 24 about 3 miles east of town. The site is fenced with chain link and sits on a flat patch of hardpan surrounded by sagebrush and tamarisk. I pulled up to the gate, killed the engine, and stepped out with my flashlight and clipboard. The air smelled like dust and creosote. The only sound was the faint buzz from the transformer and the ticking of my truck as the engine cooled. I unlocked the gate and walked the perimeter. Everything looked normal. I checked the meter, logged the reading, and was halfway back to the truck when I felt it. A pressure in my chest, not painful, just present, like standing too close to a big speaker at low volume. I stopped and turned in a slow circle. The substation hummed at the same pitch it always did. The sky was clear. The stars were bright and still. I couldn't see anything out of place. Then I smelled it. A sharp, metallic tang like the air after lightning strikes close by. It sat in my nose and made my teeth feel cold. I looked up and the blue line was back. This time, it wasn't on the horizon. It was directly overhead, thin and bright and running east to west across the entire width of the sky. I froze. My flashlight beam looked weak and useless against the ground. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just watched. The line held for maybe 5 seconds. Then it split. 2 lines now, parallel, each one as clean as the first. They drifted apart slowly until there was a gap between them wide enough to fit a dozen full moons. Then they snapped back together into one line and blinked out. The pressure in my chest vanished. The metallic smell faded. The night went back to being just a night. I stood there blinking like I'd been staring at a bright light too long. I didn't write it down right away. I walked back to the truck, sat in the driver's seat and gripped the wheel with both hands. My palms were damp. My heart was doing something fast and uneven. I told myself to calm down and think it through. A line in the sky. 2 lines. Then gone. No sound, no heat, no trail. Just light that appeared and disappeared like someone was testing a switch. I radioed base. The night operator was a guy named Marcus who's been with the company longer than I have. I kept my voice steady and told him I'd finished the Hanksville site and was heading back. He asked if everything looked good. I said yes. He said to drive safe and signed off. I didn't mention the lines. I didn't know how to say it without sounding like I'd been out in the heat too long. The drive back to Moab was quiet. I kept my eyes on the road and checked the mirrors more than I needed to. Every time I crested a hill, I scanned the sky. I didn't see the line again. By the time I pulled into the yard, it was almost 3 a.m. I parked the truck, logged my mileage, and went home. Haley was asleep. I didn't wake her. I sat on the couch with a glass of water and stared at the dark window until my eyes got heavy. The second night started the same. Same route, same sights, same coffee from the same gas station. I told myself the line was a fluke. Something atmospheric. Something I'd never see again. I was wrong. I reached the first substation north of Moab around 10:30. Everything checked out. I logged the readings and moved on. The second site was near the junction with Highway 313, the road that leads up to Dead Horse Point, and the island in the Sky District of Canyonlands. The substation sits on a bench above the highway with a view that stretches for miles. On clear nights, you can see the glow of Moab to the south and the dark bulk of the Book Cliffs to the north. I parked and stepped out. The air was cool. The wind was light. I walked to the gate and stopped. The blue line was already there. Not overhead this time. It hung low on the western horizon, just above the silhouette of the San Rafael swell. It was brighter than the night before, brighter and thicker. And it wasn't alone. 3 more lines appeared above it, stacked in parallel like rungs on a ladder. Each one glowed with that same pale blue light. They didn't pulse. They didn't move. They just hung there against the black like a grid someone was building in the sky. I felt the pressure again, the same low thrum in my chest, the same metallic taste in my mouth. I wanted to get back in the truck and leave, but my legs wouldn't move. Then the lines began to rotate, not around a center point. They tilted as one, keeping their parallel spacing, and shifted from horizontal to diagonal. The movement was smooth, mechanical, like watching the hands of a clock sweep across a face. When they reached a 45-degree angle, they stopped, and then they blinked out, all 4 at once. The pressure lifted. The smell faded. The night was empty again. I forced myself to finish the sight check. My hands shook while I wrote the meter reading. I dropped my pen twice. When I got back to the truck, I sat with the door open and my boots on the ground. I called Haley. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice thick with sleep. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, "just checking in." "It's almost midnight, Tanner." "I know. I just wanted to hear your voice." She was quiet for a second. "You sound weird. What's wrong?" "Nothing. Long night. I'll be home in a few hours." "Drive safe," she said. "Love you. Love you too." I hung up and stared at the western horizon. There was nothing there now, just stars and the faint outline of distant mesas. I started the truck and kept moving. The 3rd site was clean. The 4th site was clean. By the time I reached the 5th site near the turnoff to Green River, it was past 1 a.m. I was tired. My eyes felt dry. The coffee had worn off hours ago. I pulled into the gravel lot and parked under the single light pole that illuminates the gate. The substation here is bigger than the others. It serves a wider area and has more equipment. The hum is louder. The fence is taller. I've always liked this site because it feels more industrial and less isolated. I stepped out of the truck and my right boot hit the ground wrong. Not a stumble, just a sensation like the sole had stuck to something. I lifted my foot and looked down. The gravel under my boot was darker than the rest of the lot, not wet, scorched, a perfect circle about the size of a dinner plate. The edges were crisp, the center was smooth like glass, and my boot sole smelled like burning rubber. I crouched and touched the ground with my glove. It was warm, not hot enough to burn skin, but warm enough to notice. I pulled my boot off and checked the sole. A shallow depression ran across the heel in a clean arc. The rubber had melted slightly and cooled in a way that left a smooth, glossy finish. I've burned boots before. On hot asphalt, on engine blocks, on campfire coals. This wasn't like that. This was precise, controlled. Like something had pressed heat into the rubber for just a moment and then let go. I stood and turned in a slow circle. The lot was empty. The substation hummed. The light pole buzzed. There was no aircraft overhead, no sound of engines, no sign of anything that could have burned the ground under my truck. I looked at my watch, 1:14 a.m. I wrote it down. I wrote everything down. The scorched circle, the warm ground, the melted boot sole. I didn't know what else to do. I finished the sight check and drove back to Moab with one boot on and one boot off. My right sock had a hole in it. I didn't care. I kept the burned boot on the passenger seat and glanced at it every few minutes like it might change or disappear. It didn't. When I got home, Haley was still asleep. I put the boot in the kitchen sink and went to bed. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, Haley found the boot. She held it up and looked at me across the table. "What did you do to this?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. It looks melted. It is. How? I told her. I told her about the blue lines, the rotation, the scorched ground, the smell, the pressure in my chest. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set the boot down and crossed her arms. "You should call someone," she said. "Who?" "The sheriff, and tell them what? I saw lights in the sky and my boot got warm." "It's more than that, Tanner." "I know, but I don't have proof. Just a burned boot and some notes in a book." She looked at me for a long time. "Are you scared?" "A little," I said. "Yeah. Then stop driving at night. Tell your boss you need a different shift." "I can't. We're short-staffed, and the night routes pay better. We need the money." "We don't need it that bad." I didn't argue. She was right, but I didn't want to quit. I wanted to understand what I was seeing. That was the problem. I've never been good at leaving questions unanswered. The third night came faster than I wanted. I thought about calling in sick. I thought about telling Marcus I had truck trouble or a family emergency. But I didn't. I showed up at the yard, checked my clipboard, and rolled out just after 9 p.m. The sky was clear. The air was still. The temperature had dropped into the low 70s. It felt like every other night I'd worked that summer. Except it wasn't. Haley had asked me to text her every hour. I agreed. She didn't say it out loud, but I knew what she was thinking. If something happened to me, she wanted a timeline. She wanted to know when things went wrong. I set a timer on my phone and focused on the road. The first site was north of Moab near the Colorado River Bridge. I pulled into the access road, checked the meters, and texted Haley. "Site 1 done, all good." She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. I kept moving. The second site was clean. The third site was clean. By the time I reached the fourth site near the junction with Highway 313, it was almost midnight. I parked under the same light pole I'd used 2 nights before. The substation hummed at the same pitch. The fence rattled slightly in the breeze. I stepped out and scanned the sky. Nothing. Just stars and the faint glow of Moab to the south. I unlocked the gate and walked the perimeter with my flashlight. Everything looked normal. I was halfway through the meter check when the hum changed. It didn't get louder. It shifted in tone. Lower. Deeper. Like someone had dropped the pitch by half an octave. I stopped and listened. The transformer sounded wrong. Not failing. Just different. Then I felt it. The pressure. Stronger this time. It started in my chest and spread to my throat and jaw. My teeth buzzed. My vision blurred for a second. I dropped the clipboard and turned toward the truck. The blue line was back. Not in the sky, on the ground. It ran across the gravel lot in a perfectly straight line from the fence to the edge of the access road. Thin. Bright. Glowing with that same pale blue light. I could see it through the gaps in the fence. It didn't cast shadows. It didn't illuminate the surrounding ground. It just existed as a line of light sitting on the surface like someone had painted it there with a laser. I backed up slowly. My boots crunched on gravel. The line didn't move. I reached the gate and fumbled with the lock. My hands were shaking. The lock slipped twice before I got it open. I stepped through and pulled the gate shut behind me. The line was still there. I could see it through the chain link. Bright, steady, silent. I walked toward the truck and stopped. Another line appeared. This one ran parallel to the first, about 10 feet away. Then a third, then a fourth. They formed a grid across the lot. Each line was perfectly straight. Each one glowed with the same intensity. And none of them made a sound. The pressure in my chest climbed. I felt my heart skip a beat. My ears started to ring. I got in the truck and turned the key. The engine cranked but didn't start. I tried again. Same result. The dashboard lights dimmed, the radio went dead, the dome light flickered once and went out. I sat there with my hand on the key and watched the lines through the windshield. They held for maybe 10 seconds. Then they began to move, not drift, not slide. They snapped to new positions like someone was redrawing them in real time. 1 second, a line would be in front of me. The next second, it would be 20 feet to the left. The pattern shifted faster and faster until the entire lot was filled with crisscrossing lines that blinked in and out of existence like a strobe light. Then they stopped. All at once. The lot went dark. The pressure vanished. My ears popped. The dome light came back on. I turned the key and the engine fired up immediately. I didn't wait. I put the truck in gear and rolled out of the lot without finishing the sight check. I drove fast, faster than I should have. The speedometer climbed past 80. I didn't care. I texted Haley from a pullout near the junction with US 191. Leaving early, coming home now. She called me immediately. "What happened?" she asked. "I'll tell you when I get there." "Tanner, you're scaring me." "I'm fine. I'm just done for the night." I hung up and kept driving. I reached Moab by 1:30 a.m. and went straight home. Haley was waiting on the porch. She looked at my face and didn't ask questions. She just pulled me inside and locked the door. I told her everything. The grid of lines, the dead engine, the pressure that felt like it was going to crack my ribs. She listened and then said the same thing she'd said that morning. "You need to stop." "I know. I mean it, Tanner. This isn't worth it." "I know." She made me promise I'd call my boss in the morning and ask for a transfer to day routes. I promised. I meant it. But part of me still wanted to know what I was seeing. Part of me still wanted to go back. The next day I called Marcus. I told him I needed a shift change. I didn't tell him why. He said he'd check with the schedule manager and get back to me. 2 days later, he called and said there was an opening on the day crew starting the following week. I took it. Haley was relieved. I was relieved. But I couldn't stop thinking about the lines. I started asking around. Quiet questions. Casual conversations. I talked to a few other drivers who ran night routes. Most of them shrugged and said they'd seen strange lights before. Meteors, satellites, drones. One guy said he'd seen a green flash once near the turnoff to Dead Horse Point. Another guy said he'd heard stories about lights over the Book Cliffs, but had never seen anything himself. No one mentioned blue lines. No one mentioned grids. No one mentioned burned ground. I tried the internet. I searched for blue lines in Sky, Utah, and found forum posts about military exercises and atmospheric phenomena. I searched for grid patterns in desert sky and found nothing useful. I searched for burned ground, no heat source, and got articles about ball lightning and meteor impacts. None of it matched what I'd seen. One night, I drove out to Bluff to see Haley. She works at a small clinic there 3 days a week. We had dinner at a cafe on the main strip and then sat in her truck watching the sun drop behind the red cliffs. I told her I couldn't let it go. She said she knew. "You're going to go back out there, aren't you?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe. If you do, I'm coming with you." "No, it's not safe." "Then it's not safe for you either." I didn't argue. She was right. We sat in silence for a while. The sky turned orange and then purple. The first stars appeared. I thought about the blue lines. I thought about the grid. I thought about the way my truck had died and then started again like nothing had happened. "What do you think it is?" Haley asked. "I don't know. Something that doesn't want to be seen. Or something that wants us to see it and doesn't care if we understand." I looked at her. She was staring at the horizon with her arms crossed. "You believe me," I said. "Of course I believe you. I've seen the boot, and I've seen your face when you talk about it." You're not making this up. Then what do I do? You stay away from it, and if you can't do that, you make sure someone knows where you are. I nodded. We drove back to Moab in separate trucks. I followed her taillights the whole way. When we reached town, she turned toward her place and I kept going toward mine. I parked in my driveway and sat with the engine running. The night was quiet. The stars were bright. I looked up through the windshield and scanned the sky. There were no lines, just the Milky Way and a few satellites drifting slow and steady. I turned off the engine and went inside. The next week, I started the day shift. The work was the same, but the light was different. I could see the substations clearly. I could see the roads. I could see other vehicles and people and signs of normal life. It felt safer. It felt boring. I told myself I was fine with that. But at night, when I lay in bed, I thought about the lines. I thought about the grid. I thought about the scorched circle in the gravel and the way my boot sole had melted in a perfect arc. I thought about the pressure in my chest and the metallic taste in my mouth. I thought about the way the night had felt wrong in a way I couldn't name. 2 weeks later, I broke my promise. I told Haley I was going out to check on a friend's cabin near Hanksville. I told her I'd be back by morning. She looked at me and said, "You're going back to that substation, aren't you?" "No," I lied. "Tanner. I'm just going to drive past it. I won't stop. I just need to see if anything's changed." "Take me with you." "It's a long drive. You have work in the morning." "I don't care." I thought about arguing. I thought about going alone. But the look on her face told me she wouldn't let it go. So I agreed. We left Moab just after sunset and drove north on US 191. The road was empty. The sky was clear. Haley didn't talk much. She just watched the horizon and kept her hands in her lap. We reached the junction with Highway 313 around 10 p.m. I turned west and followed the road toward the substation. My heart was beating faster than it should have been. My palms were damp on the wheel. Haley glanced at me and didn't say anything. I slowed as we approached the access road. The substation sat on the bench above us, lit by a single light pole. Everything looked normal. No blue lines, no grid, no burned ground, just a fenced lot with a transformer humming in the dark. "See?" Haley said. "It's fine." I nodded, but I didn't feel fine. I felt like something was waiting. We drove past the access road and kept going west. The highway curved through low hills and crossed a wash. I was about to turn around when Haley pointed at the sky. "Tanner." I looked up. The blue line was back. But this time it wasn't alone. 5 lines hung in the sky above the western horizon. Parallel, evenly spaced, glowing with that same pale blue light. They stretched from north to south as far as I could see, and they were rotating, slowly, in unison, like the bars of a cage turning on an invisible axis. I pulled over and killed the engine. We sat in silence and watched. The lines rotated until they were nearly vertical. Then they stopped, and then they began to pulse. Not a flicker, a steady rhythm. Bright, dim, bright, dim. Each pulse lasted about 2 seconds. The pattern held for maybe 30 seconds. Then the lines blinked out. Haley was gripping the door handle. Her knuckles were white. "We should go," she said. "Yeah." I started the truck and turned around. We drove back toward Moab without speaking. I checked the mirrors every few seconds. The sky behind us stayed dark. When we reached town, Haley turned to me. "You can't go back out there," she said. "I know. I mean it. Whatever that is, it's not something we're supposed to see." "I know." She looked at me for a long time. "Promise me." "I promise." I meant it. But deep down, I knew the lines weren't done with me. I kept my promise to Haley for 3 weeks. I worked day shifts. I came home before dark. I didn't drive the night routes. I didn't go back to the substations. I tried to forget about the blue lines and the grid and the scorched ground. But I couldn't. Every clear night I found myself standing in the driveway, staring at the sky. Waiting. Haley noticed. She didn't say anything at first. But after a week of watching me stand outside in the cold, she pulled me back inside and sat me down at the kitchen table. "Talk to me," she said. "About what?" "About whatever's keeping you up at night. You're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're standing outside staring at nothing." "I'm fine." "You're not fine, Tanner, and I don't know how to help you if you won't talk to me." I looked at her. Her eyes were tired. I realized I'd been so focused on the lines that I hadn't noticed how much this was affecting her too. "I keep thinking about it," I said. "The lines, the grid, the way it felt when the truck died. I keep thinking there's something I'm supposed to understand. Some pattern I'm missing. Or maybe there's nothing to understand. Maybe it's just something strange that happened and now it's over." "It's not over. How do you know?" "I just do." She sighed and reached across the table. She took my hand and squeezed it. "I love you," she said, "but I'm scared. I'm scared you're going to go back out there and something bad is going to happen." "I won't go back." "You say that, but I see the way you look at the sky. You're not done with this, and I don't think it's done with you either." She was right. A week later, I got a call from Marcus. He said one of the night drivers had quit without notice and they needed someone to cover a few shifts until they could hire a replacement. He asked if I could help out, just for a week, maybe 2. I told him I'd think about it. I didn't tell Haley about the call. I knew what she'd say. But the money was good. And part of me wanted an excuse to be out there again. Part of me needed to know if the lines would come back. I took the shift. I told Haley I was picking up some overtime during the day. She believed me. I hated lying to her, but I couldn't stop myself. The first night back on the route felt like coming home. The empty roads, the dark sky, the hum of the substations. I'd missed it more than I wanted to admit. The first 2 nights were quiet. No lines, no grids, no burned ground, just normal work. I started to think maybe Haley had been right. Maybe it was over. Maybe I'd never see the lines again. But on the 3rd night, everything changed. I was at the substation near Hanksville, the same site where I'd seen the blue line for the 2nd time. I pulled into the gravel lot and parked under the light pole. The air was cold. The wind had picked up. I could hear it whistling through the fence. I stepped out with my clipboard and flashlight and walked toward the gate. The blue line appeared before I reached the fence. It hung in the air about 6 feet off the ground, running parallel to the fence line. Thin, bright, silent. I stopped walking. My breath came out in short bursts. The pressure started in my chest. The metallic taste filled my mouth. I didn't move. The line held for a few seconds. Then it dropped, straight down. It touched the ground and spread out like water poured onto concrete. The blue light flowed across the gravel in a perfect circle, expanding outward until it reached my boots. I stepped back. The light touched the toe of my right boot and stopped. The rubber began to smoke. I yanked my foot back and stumbled. The circle of light held its position. Then it began to pulse. Bright, dim. Bright, dim. Each pulse pushed a wave of heat across my skin. I felt my face flush. My hands started to sweat. I turned and ran for the truck. I made it 3 steps before the light flashed. A single, brilliant burst that turned the entire lot white. I threw my arm over my eyes and dropped to one knee. The heat was intense. Not burning, but close. When the light faded, I looked up. The circle was gone. The lot was dark. The pressure in my chest was gone. The metallic taste was gone. Everything was normal again. Except it wasn't. When I stood up, I saw them. Footprints, 3 sets. Leading from the circle of scorched ground to the fence and then stopping. The prints were narrow, too narrow for boots, and they didn't have treads, just smooth depressions in the gravel, each one about 8 inches long. I walked toward the fence and crouched beside the prints. They were fresh. I could see the displaced gravel. I reached out to touch one and stopped. My hand was shaking. I pulled it back and stood up. I looked around the lot. There was no one there, no vehicles, no sound except the hum of the transformer and the wind through the fence. I finished the sight check as fast as I could. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely write. I locked the gate, got in the truck, and drove. I didn't look in the mirrors. I didn't check the sky. I just drove. I called Haley from a pullout on Highway 24. It was almost 2 a.m. She answered on the first ring. "Tanner, what's wrong?" "I lied to you. I'm on the night route. I saw it again. The light. And there were prints." "What kind of prints?" "I don't know. Not human. Not animal. Just prints." She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was calm. Too calm. "Where are you?" "Heading back to Moab. Come to my place in Bluff. Don't go home. Come here. Okay? And Tanner, don't stop. Don't pull over. Just drive straight here. Okay." I hung up and kept driving. The highway was empty. The sky was clear. I kept my eyes on the road and tried not to think about the prints. About what could have made them. About where they had gone when they reached the fence. I reached Bluff just after 3 a.m. Haley was waiting on her porch. She pulled me inside and locked the door. She made me sit down. She made me drink water. Then she sat across from me and crossed her arms. "You need to quit," she said. "I know. I'm serious. You need to call Marcus right now and tell him you're done. It's 3 in the morning. I don't care. Call him." I called. Marcus answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep. I told him I couldn't do the night shifts anymore. I told him I was done. He asked if everything was okay. I said yes. He said he'd find someone else and hung up. Haley looked at me. "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know. Stay away from it, I guess." "That's not enough. You need to talk to someone. A doctor. A therapist. Someone. And tell them what? That I saw blue lines in the sky and footprints in the dirt? They'll think I'm crazy." "You're not crazy. But you're not okay either. This thing is eating you alive." She was right. I knew she was right. But I didn't know how to stop thinking about it. The lines, the grid, the heat, the prints, it all sat in my head like a puzzle I couldn't solve. The next morning, I drove back to the substation near Hanksville. I don't know why. I just needed to see it in daylight. I needed to know if the prints were still there. I reached the site around 10 a.m. The lot looked normal. The fence was intact. The transformer hummed at its usual pitch. I walked to the spot where I'd seen the circle of light. The scorched ground was still there. A perfect circle about 10 feet across. The gravel inside the circle had fused into a glassy surface. And the footprints were still there. 3 sets leading from the circle to the fence. They stopped at the chain link. There was nothing on the other side, no prints in the dirt. No sign of anything passing through. They just stopped. I took pictures with my phone. I measured the prints with a tape measure from my truck. 8 inches long, 3 inches wide. No tread, no heel. Just smooth depressions pressed into the gravel. I didn't know what to do with the information. I just knew I needed to document it. I sent the pictures to Haley. She called me immediately. "What are you doing out there?" she asked. I needed to see it. Tanner, you promised. I know. I'm sorry. But I had to know if it was real. It's real. Now come back. I will. I just need a minute. I hung up and walked the perimeter of the circle. The ground outside the circle was normal. Inside, everything was changed. Fused, melted, like something had pressed heat into the earth for just a moment and then let go. I thought about my boot sole, about the way the rubber had melted in a perfect arc. This was the same, controlled, precise. I stood in the center of the circle and looked up at the sky. It was clear, blue, empty. No lines, no grid, just a normal October morning in the Utah desert. I took a breath and let it out slowly. I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I knew I couldn't keep chasing it. It was going to break me. I drove back to Moab and went straight to the utilities office. I told my supervisor I was resigning. He asked why. I said personal reasons. He tried to talk me out of it. I said no. He shook my hand and said the door was always open if I changed my mind. I thanked him and left. That night, I told Haley everything. About the circle, about the prints, about the way the ground had fused into glass. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know. Find a new job, move on, try to forget about it." "Can you?" "I have to." But I couldn't, not really. Even now, months later, I think about the blue lines. I think about the grid that filled the lot with crisscrossing light. I think about the footprints that stopped at the fence and went nowhere. I think about the way my truck died and then started again like nothing had happened. I've tried to find answers. I've searched online. I've talked to people who claim to have seen strange things in the desert. I've read about atmospheric phenomena and military testing and unexplained lights. None of it matches. None of it explains the prints. None of it explains the heat. Haley and I moved to Durango last month. She got a job at a clinic there. I'm working construction. It's honest work. It's safe work. It doesn't involve driving empty roads at night or checking substations in the dark. I sleep better now, but I still stand outside sometimes and look at the sky. Waiting. Here's what I know. Something is out there in the Utah desert. Something that moves in straight lines and leaves marks in the ground. Something that can kill a truck engine with no warning and bring it back to life just as fast. Something that doesn't want to be understood. Or maybe it doesn't care if we understand. Maybe it's just doing what it does, and we're the ones trying to make sense of it. I'm writing this down because I think someone needs to know. If you work night routes between Moab and Hanksville, be careful. If you see blue lines in the sky, don't stop to watch. If your truck dies for no reason and then starts again, get out of there. If you see footprints in the dirt that don't belong to anything you recognize, turn around and don't look back. I stayed out there longer than I should have. I chased something I didn't understand. And it left marks on me that won't fade. Not the burned boot sole, not the pictures on my phone. The marks are deeper than that. They're in the way I check the sky every night, in the way I feel my chest tighten when I see a straight line of light, in the way I can't let go of the question that sits in my head like a weight. What were those prints walking toward? I don't have an answer, and I've accepted that I never will. The best I can do is move on, build a life somewhere else. Stay away from empty roads and dark substations and places where the sky feels too big and too close at the same time. If you're reading this and you've seen the same things, I'm sorry. I know how it feels. The confusion, the fear, the need to understand. My advice is simple. Don't chase it. Don't try to explain it. Just walk away. Because whatever's out there in the Moab sky, it's not something we're meant to understand, and trying to understand it will only break you. That's my ending. I left. I moved on. I stopped asking questions I couldn't answer. And I'm still here. That's enough. My name is Lucy Ortega. I dispatch for a small freight company that runs loads between Flagstaff and Salt Lake City. Most of our routes cut through the empty stretches of southern Utah where the roads are long, the towns are small, and cell service drops out for hours at a time. We haul construction materials, furniture, machine parts, anything that fits in a box truck or a flatbed. The work is steady. The drivers are reliable. And in 4 years, I've never had to file a missing person report. Until Tomas. Tomas Vega started driving for us 2 years ago. He's 46, quiet, steady, the kind of man who shows up on time and doesn't complain about long hauls or bad weather. He grew up in Cortez, Colorado, and knows the Four Corners region better than most people know their own neighborhoods. He's run the Bluff route more times than I can count. It's a simple run. Pick up a load in Flagstaff, head north through Monument Valley, drop off in Bluff, then return empty or pick up another load heading south. The whole loop takes about 10 hours if you don't stop for more than fuel and food. On October 12th, Tomas left Flagstaff at 6 a.m. with a load of restaurant equipment bound for a new cafe in Bluff. He called me from Kayenta around 9:30 to confirm he was on schedule. His voice was clear. He sounded fine. He said the weather was good and traffic was light. He estimated he'd reach Bluff by early afternoon. That was the last time I heard from him. By 4 p.m., the cafe owner in Bluff called me. She said Tomas hadn't arrived. I tried his cell. No answer. I tried his radio. Nothing. I waited an hour and tried again. Still nothing. At 6 p.m., I called the San Juan County Sheriff's Office and filed a report. A deputy said they'd send a patrol to check the route between Mexican Hat and Bluff. He called me back an hour later and said they'd found the truck. It was parked on the shoulder of US 191, about 8 miles south of Bluff. The engine was running. The hazard lights were off. The driver's side door was open, and Tomas was gone. I left the office immediately and drove to Bluff. It's a 5-hour drive from Flagstaff. I took US 89 north, then cut east on US 160 through the Navajo Nation. The sun dropped fast. By the time I reached Mexican Hat, it was full dark. The sky was clear, the stars were bright, the road was empty. I kept my phone on the passenger seat and checked it every few minutes. No calls, no texts, nothing from Tomas. I reached the scene around 11 p.m. 2 sheriff's vehicles were parked behind the truck with their lights running. A deputy waved me over. His name was Garrett. He was in his 30s, tall and lean, with a clipboard in one hand and a flashlight in the other. He asked if I was Lucy Ortega. I said yes. He asked if I was the one who filed the report. I said yes. He nodded and gestured toward the truck. "We've been here for about 4 hours," he said. "We've searched a half-mile radius on foot. No sign of your driver, no tracks leading away from the vehicle, no blood, no signs of a struggle. The truck was running when we got here. Keys in the ignition, door open, radio off. We turned the engine off about an hour ago to preserve fuel." "What about his phone?" I asked. "We found it on the passenger seat. Battery's dead." "His wallet?" "In the glove box. Cash and cards intact." I looked at the truck. It was one of our newer box trucks. A white Isuzu NPR with the company logo on the side. The cargo door was closed and locked. The side mirrors were intact. The tires looked fine. Everything looked normal except for the open door and the missing driver. "Can I look inside?" I asked. Garrett nodded. He walked me to the cab and shined his flashlight through the open door. The interior was clean. No trash, no spilled drinks, no signs of panic. The seat was pushed back like Tomas had just stepped out for a moment. His thermos sat in the cup holder. His logbook sat on the dash. I leaned in and picked up the logbook. The last entry was from 1:47 p.m. He'd noted his location as US 191, 10 miles south of Bluff, and his status as on schedule. I set the logbook down and stepped back. That's when I saw it. On the steering wheel, written in dust. A single word traced with a finger. Wait. I stared at it. The letters were clear, deliberate. The dust on the wheel was thin, but the word stood out like someone had written it carefully and slowly. I pointed at it. Did you see this? I asked Garrett. He leaned in and looked. His flashlight beam caught the word and held it. He frowned. No, he said. That wasn't there when we arrived. Are you sure? I checked the cab myself. I would have noticed. I felt my stomach drop. I stepped away from the truck and looked around. The highway stretched north and south in straight lines. The desert spread out in all directions. Low hills, scattered brush, red dirt, no buildings, no lights, no people. Just empty land under a big sky. Where could he have gone? I asked. That's what we're trying to figure out, Garrett said. We've got a dog unit coming from Monticello. Should be here in an hour. If he walked off for some reason, they'll pick up the trail. I nodded. I didn't know what else to say. I walked back to my truck and sat on the tailgate. The air was cold. The wind was light. I could hear the deputies talking in low voices near their vehicles. I pulled out my phone and tried Tomas again. Straight to voicemail. I sent him a text. Where are you? We're all looking. Please call. I hit send and watched the message sit there. Delivered, not read. The dog unit arrived around midnight. A handler and a bloodhound. They started at the truck and worked outward in wide circles. The dog moved fast, nose to the ground, pulling hard on the leash. It circled the truck twice, then headed south along the shoulder for about 50 yards. It stopped, turned, and came back. It repeated the pattern 3 times. Then it sat down and looked at the handler. Nothing? Garrett asked. Nothing, the handler said. If he walked away, he didn't go far. And if he did, the scent trail is gone. How is that possible? Wind, time, could be a lot of things. But the dog's telling me there's no clear trail to follow. Garrett thanked him. The handler loaded the dog back into his truck and left. I sat on my tailgate and watched the taillights disappear down the highway. Garrett walked over and leaned against my truck. We're going to keep the scene secure tonight, he said. We'll bring in a larger search team at first light. Fish and Wildlife has a helicopter. We'll get an aerial view of the area. If he's out there, we'll find him. And if he's not... Garrett didn't answer right away. He looked at the horizon. The stars were so bright they cast faint shadows. Then we'll keep looking, he said. I spent the night in a motel in Bluff. A small place on the main strip with a neon sign that flickered in a parking lot full of potholes. I didn't sleep. I sat on the bed with my phone in my hand and stared at the wall. Every time a car passed on the highway, I looked at the window. Every time my phone buzzed, I checked it. Nothing from Tomas. Just messages from other drivers asking if there was any news. I didn't know what to tell them. At first light, I drove back to the scene. The search team had expanded. 10 deputies, 5 volunteers from Bluff, 2 rangers from the BLM. They were spread out across the desert in a line, walking slowly, eyes on the ground. The helicopter circled overhead in wide loops. I parked on the shoulder and watched. The truck was still there. The door was still open. The word on the steering wheel was still there. Garrett saw me and walked over. He looked tired. His uniform was dusty. His face was drawn. Anything? I asked. Nothing. We've covered 2 square miles. No tracks. No clothing. No signs of disturbance. It's like he vanished. What about the word on the steering wheel? We documented it, took photos, dusted for prints. Nothing. Just smudges. Could have been him, could have been someone else, we don't know. Wait, I said. The word is wait, like he was telling someone to wait, or someone was telling him to wait. Garrett nodded. We considered that. But we don't know who or what he was waiting for. I looked at the truck. The engine was off. The door was open. The word was there. I couldn't make sense of it. None of it made sense. By mid-afternoon, the search was called off for the day. The helicopter had covered a 10-mile radius and found nothing. The ground teams had walked every accessible area within 3 miles. No trace. No clues. No Tomas. Garrett said they'd resume the search the next day if needed, but he didn't sound optimistic. I stayed in Bluff. I walked the main strip. I talked to locals. I asked if anyone had seen Tomas or his truck before it was found. No one had. I stopped at the cafe where he was supposed to deliver the equipment. The owner was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a sad smile. She said she'd been expecting him all afternoon on the 12th. She said she'd tried calling him when he didn't show. She said she was sorry. That night I drove back to the scene alone. I don't know why. I just felt like I needed to see it again. The truck had been towed to a county impound lot, but the spot where it had been parked was still marked with cones and tape. I parked on the shoulder and got out. The wind was stronger than the night before. It pushed dust across the asphalt in thin waves. I walked to the spot where the driver's door had been and stood there. The desert stretched out in all directions. Dark. Empty. Silent. I tried to picture Tomas standing here. I tried to imagine what he would have seen, what he would have heard. What would make him leave the truck with the engine running and the door open? I couldn't. I looked up at the sky. The stars were bright. The Milky Way stretched overhead like a river of light. And then I saw them. 3 white points, high above, moving slowly, in formation. A perfect triangle. They didn't blink. They didn't pulse. They just moved. Steady. Silent. Crossing the sky from east to west. I watched them for maybe 30 seconds. Then they stopped. All 3, at the same time. They hung there, motionless, for a few seconds. And then they blinked out. 1, 2, 3, gone. I stood there with my heart pounding. I told myself they were satellites, or planes, or drones. But satellites don't stop. Planes don't move in perfect formation without lights, and drones don't disappear without a sound. I got back in my truck and drove to the motel. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat on the bed and replayed what I'd seen. 3 lights. A triangle. Moving. Stopping. Gone. I thought about Tomas. I thought about the word on the steering wheel. Wait. The next morning I called Garrett. I told him about the lights. He was quiet for a moment. "What time did you see them?" he asked. "Around 9 p.m. "And they were in a triangle formation?" "Yes." "Did you take any pictures?" "No, I didn't think to." He was quiet again. Then he said, "We've had reports of unusual lights in this area before, mostly from campers and hikers. Nothing we've been able to explain, but nothing that's ever been connected to a missing person." "Until now," I said. "Maybe. We don't know. I'll add it to the report." I hung up and sat in my truck. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go back to Flagstaff and pretend everything was normal. I couldn't leave Bluff without knowing what happened to Tomas. So I stayed. I rented the motel room for another week. I drove the route between Bluff and Mexican Hat every day. I stopped at every pullout. I walked into the desert and looked for anything that might help. I found nothing. On the fourth night, I drove back to the scene again. Same spot, same time. I parked and got out. The wind was calm. The sky was clear. I stood on the shoulder and waited. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe the lights. Maybe Tomas. Maybe just a sign that I wasn't losing my mind. At 9:15, the lights appeared. Same formation, same altitude, same slow, steady movement. They crossed the sky from east to west, and then they stopped. Right above me, I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The 3 points hung there, motionless. And then they began to descend, slowly, carefully, coming lower. I wanted to run. I wanted to get in my truck and drive. But I couldn't move. I just stood there and watched. The lights dropped to maybe 500 feet above the ground. Then they stopped again. They hung there for what felt like a full minute. And then they rose, fast, straight up, and blinked out. The pressure in my chest released. I gasped and bent over, hands on my knees. My legs were shaking. My hands were shaking. I looked around. The desert was empty. The highway was empty. There was no sound except the wind and my own ragged breathing. I got in my truck and drove back to the motel. I called Garrett and left a voicemail. I told him I'd seen the lights again. I told him they'd descended. I told him I didn't know what they were, but I thought they might be connected to Tomas. I hung up and sat on the bed. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The next morning, Garrett called me back. He said he'd driven out to the scene the night before after getting my message. He said he'd waited until midnight. He said he didn't see anything. He asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. He said I should probably go home and let them handle the investigation. I said I would. I lied. That night, I went back. Same spot, same time. The lights appeared at 9:12. Same formation, same movement. They stopped above me. They descended, they hung there, and then they rose and blinked out. I documented everything: time, duration, position, movement. I wrote it all down in a notebook. I didn't know what else to do. On the seventh night, something changed. The lights appeared at 9:10. 2 minutes earlier than before. They moved across the sky in the same formation. They stopped above me. They descended. But this time they didn't rise. They hung there, 500 feet above the ground, motionless. And then I felt it, a low hum. Not in my ears, in my chest, a vibration that made my ribs ache. The air around me felt thick, heavy, like I was standing at the bottom of a pool. My ears popped, my vision blurred. I tried to move. I couldn't. My legs wouldn't respond. My arms hung at my sides. I could only stand there and watch. The lights began to pulse. Slow, steady, bright, dim, bright, dim. Each pulse pushed a wave of pressure through my body. I felt my heart skip a beat. My breath came in short gasps. And then I heard it. A voice. Faint. Distant. Like someone speaking through a wall. Wait! I tried to speak. I tried to ask who was there, but my voice wouldn't come. The lights pulsed 3 more times. Then they rose, fast, straight up, and blinked out. The pressure vanished. The hum stopped. I collapsed to my knees. My hands hit the asphalt. I gasped for air. When I finally stood up, my legs were weak. My head was spinning. I looked around. The desert was empty. The highway was empty. But I knew what I'd heard. The same word that was written on the steering wheel. Wait. I drove back to the motel. I sat on the bed and stared at my notebook. 7 nights, 7 sightings, The same lights, the same pattern, and now a voice. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. Something was out there, something that had taken Tomas, something that was telling me to wait. I stopped going to the scene at night, not because I wanted to, but because I was terrified of what might happen if I kept showing up. The voice had been clear. The pressure had been real. Whatever was out there knew I was watching, and I didn't know if waiting meant staying away or showing up again. Instead, I spent my days in Bluff asking questions. I talked to the few locals who worked at the gas station, the diner, and the small grocery store on the main strip. Most of them knew about Tomas, the missing truck driver, the search that came up empty. But no one had seen anything unusual. No strange vehicles, no lights, nothing. On the 8th day, I met an older man at the diner. His name was Earl. He was in his 70s, with weathered skin and hands that looked like they'd spent decades working outside. He sat at the counter drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. I sat 2 stools down and ordered the same. After a few minutes, he glanced at me. "You're the one asking about the missing driver," he said. "Yeah," I said. "Did you know him?" "No, but I know the area where they found his truck. I've ranched out here for 50 years. I know that stretch of road better than most. Have you ever seen anything strange out there?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then he folded his newspaper and set it aside. "Depends on what you mean by strange," he said. "I've seen dust devils that don't move right. I've seen lights that don't belong to planes or stars. I've heard sounds at night that make my horses spook, but nothing I could prove. Nothing I could take to the sheriff and say, this is what happened." "When was the last time you saw lights?" "About 2 weeks ago, late September. I was moving cattle near the highway. It was just after dark. I saw 3 lights in a triangle formation. They moved slow. Then they stopped. Then they were gone." I didn't think much of it at the time, but after what happened to your driver, I started wondering. Did anyone else see them? "My grandson, he was with me that night. He's 16. He took a video on his phone, but the lights didn't show up. Just a black screen with nothing on it." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Do you think they're connected to what happened to Tomas?" Earl took a sip of his coffee. "I don't know, but I'll tell you this. That stretch of road has always felt wrong to me, especially at night. I don't drive it unless I have to, and I don't stop. Why? Because things happen out there. Trucks break down for no reason. People see things they can't explain. And every few years someone goes missing. Not always a driver, sometimes a hiker, sometimes a camper. They find the vehicle, they find the camp, but they don't find the person. How many people? 4 that I know of. Over the past 20 years, maybe more. The sheriff's office doesn't like to talk about it. They call it exposure, dehydration, getting lost. But I've lived here long enough to know when something doesn't add up." I thanked him for talking to me. He nodded and went back to his coffee. I left the diner and sat in my truck. 4 people, 20 years. And now Tomas. I pulled out my notebook and wrote it down. I didn't know what to do with the information, but I knew I couldn't leave it alone. That night, I broke my own rule. I drove back to the scene, same spot, same time. I parked on the shoulder and got out. The wind was strong. It pushed dust across the road in waves. I stood on the asphalt and looked up. The sky was clear. The stars were bright. And the lights appeared at 9:08. 2 minutes earlier than the night before. They moved in the same formation. A perfect triangle. They stopped above me. They descended. They hung there at 500 feet. And then the hum started, low, deep, vibrating in my chest. I felt my ears pop, my vision blurred, and I heard the voice, "Wait, This time I forced myself to speak. "Wait for what?" I said out loud. The lights pulsed. Bright. Dim. Bright, dim. The hum grew stronger, and the voice came again, clearer this time, like it was right next to me. "Wait, he comes." My blood went cold. "Who comes?" I asked. The lights pulsed 3 more times. Then they rose, fast, straight up, and blinked out. The hum stopped. The pressure vanished. I stood there shaking. My hands were clenched into fists. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. "He comes." I got in my truck and drove back to the motel. I sat on the bed and wrote down everything. The time, the voice, the words. Wait, he comes. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know if it meant Tomas or something else. But I knew I had to go back. The next night, I went back. The lights appeared at 9:05. 3 minutes earlier, same formation, same descent, same hum, same voice. "Wait, he comes." I asked when. I asked where. I asked why. But the lights just pulsed and rose and blinked out. No answers, just the same words. I kept going back, every night. The lights appeared earlier each time. 9:03, 9 o'clock, 8:57. The pattern was consistent. The message was the same. "Wait, he comes." I documented everything. I filled 3 notebooks. I took pictures of the sky. The lights never showed up in the photos. Just black screens with stars. On the 14th night, something changed. The lights appeared at 8:52. They descended. They stopped. The hum started. But this time, the voice was different. It wasn't distant. It wasn't faint. It was clear. Close. Like someone was standing right next to me. Tonight. I spun around. There was no one there. Just empty road, empty desert. I looked back up at the lights. They pulsed once, twice, 3 times. And then they blinked out. But they didn't rise first. They just disappeared. Like someone had flipped a switch. I stood there for a long time. My legs felt weak. My hands were shaking. Tonight. What did that mean? Was Tomas coming back? Was something else coming? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't leave. I got in my truck and waited. I sat with the engine off and the windows down. The wind was calm. The sky was clear. The only sound was the occasional car passing on the highway. I checked my watch every few minutes. 9:15, 9:30, 9:45. Nothing. At 10:07, I felt it. The hum, low, deep, coming from the desert to the west. I got out of the truck and turned toward the sound. The hum grew louder, stronger. I felt it in my teeth, in my bones. And then I saw them. Not 3 lights, dozens, maybe more. They rose from behind a low ridge about a mile away. They moved in perfect formation. Rows and columns, like a grid. They climbed into the sky and spread out in all directions. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my throat. The lights moved closer. They were lower than before, maybe 200 feet above the ground. They passed over the highway in a wave. The hum was deafening. I covered my ears. It didn't help. The pressure in my chest was crushing. I dropped to my knees. And then I saw him. Tomas. He was standing on the shoulder about 100 yards south of me. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, facing the lights. His arms hung at his sides. His head was tilted back. He looked small, fragile, like a shadow against the brightness above him. I tried to call out to him. I tried to run toward him, but my legs wouldn't move. The pressure held me in place. The lights passed over him. They stopped. They descended. And then they surrounded him. A column of light dropped from above and engulfed him, bright, white, blinding. I had to look away. When I looked back, the lights were rising, fast, straight up, and Tomas was gone. The column was gone. The grid was gone. The hum stopped. The pressure vanished. The highway was empty. I stood up on shaking legs and ran to the spot where he'd been standing. There was nothing there. No footprints. No scorch marks. No sign that anyone had been there. Just empty asphalt and the faint smell of ozone in the air. I looked up at the sky. The lights were gone. The stars were bright. And I was alone. I called Garrett. It was after 10 p.m. He answered on the third ring. "Lucy? What's wrong? I saw him. I saw Tomas." "Where?" "At the scene. On the highway. He was standing there, and then the lights came. And he's gone again." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "Are you okay? Have you been drinking?" "No, I'm not drunk. I'm not crazy. I saw him. I'm telling you, I saw him. I'll send a unit out there. Stay where you are. I'm already here. I'm at the scene. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up. I stood on the shoulder and waited. The wind picked up. It pushed dust across the road. I wrapped my arms around myself and tried to stop shaking. I kept looking at the spot where Tomas had been. Empty. Just empty. Garrett arrived with another deputy. They parked behind my truck and got out. Garrett walked over to me. His face was concerned. His hand rested on his belt near his flashlight. "Show me where you saw him," he said. I walked him to the spot. I pointed at the asphalt. "Right here. He was standing right here." Garrett shined his flashlight on the ground. The deputy did the same. They walked in slow circles. They checked the shoulder. They checked the desert on both sides. They found nothing. "There's no sign anyone was here," Garrett said. "I know. But he was here. I saw him." "What was he wearing?" I stopped. I realized I couldn't remember. I couldn't picture what he'd been wearing. I couldn't even picture his face clearly. Just the silhouette. The shape of a man standing against the light. "I don't know," I said. "It was dark. The lights were bright. I couldn't see details." Garrett looked at me for a long time. "Lucy, you've been out here every night for 2 weeks. You're not sleeping. You're not eating. You're exhausted. Maybe you saw something. Maybe you didn't. But I think you need to go home. Get some rest. Let us handle this. I'm not leaving. You're not helping. You're making this harder on yourself." He was here. I know he was. Garrett sighed. He looked at the deputy. The deputy shrugged. Garrett turned back to me. "I'll make you a deal," he said. "Go back to your motel. Get some sleep. If you still want to talk in the morning, call me. We'll sit down and go through everything, but right now, you need to rest." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. But I was too tired, too shaken. I nodded. Garrett walked me to my truck. I got in and started the engine. He leaned in the window. "Drive safe," he said. "And Lucy, don't come back here tonight." I nodded again. I drove to the motel. I sat in the parking lot for a long time. I couldn't stop thinking about Tomas, about the way he'd stood there, about the way the light had swallowed him, about the way he'd disappeared without a trace. I went inside and sat on the bed. I pulled out my notebook and wrote it all down. The time, the lights, the grid, the column. Tomas. Everything. When I finished, I looked at the pages. They were filled with notes, dates, times, descriptions, but no answers, just questions. I lay back on the bed and closed my eyes. I didn't think I'd sleep, but exhaustion pulled me under. I dreamed of lights, of standing on an empty highway, of a voice saying, "Wait." When I woke up, it was morning, and my phone was ringing. It was Garrett. "Lucy, you need to come down to the station. We found something." I drove to the San Juan County Sheriff's Station in Monticello. It took me an hour. The whole drive, I kept thinking about what Garrett had said. We found something. I didn't know if that was good or bad. I didn't know if it meant they'd found Tomas or just more questions. The station was a single-story building on the north side of town. I parked in front and went inside. The receptionist recognized me. She said Garrett was waiting in his office. I walked down a short hallway and knocked on his door. He called me in. Garrett was sitting at his desk with a folder open in front of him. He looked tired, more tired than I'd ever seen him. He gestured to a chair. I sat down. "What did you find?" I asked. He closed the folder and looked at me. "We got a call this morning from a rancher north of Bluff. He was checking his fence line and found something in one of his pastures. Clothing, a shirt, pants, boots. They matched the description of what Tomas was wearing the day he disappeared." My heart skipped. Was there anything else? Any sign of him? No. Just the clothes, folded neatly on the ground. No blood, no tears, no damage. Like someone had taken them off, folded them, and set them down. Where? About 3 miles west of where we found his truck. Middle of nowhere, no roads nearby, no reason for anyone to be out there. I tried to process what he was saying. So he walked 3 miles into the desert, took off his clothes, and just left them there? That's what it looks like. But it doesn't make sense. The clothes weren't dirty, the boots weren't scuffed. It's like they were placed there deliberately. Did you search the area? We did. We brought dogs. We brought a helicopter. We covered 5 square miles. Nothing. No tracks, no body. No sign he was ever there except the clothes. I felt sick. What about the word on the steering wheel? Wait. What does that mean? Garrett shook his head. I don't know. We analyzed it. We dusted for prints. All we got was smudges. Could be his. Could be someone else's. We can't tell. And the lights? Did you look into the lights? We did. We checked with Hill Air Force Base. They said they had no operations in the area that night. We checked with local drone operators. Nothing. We looked into atmospheric phenomena. Ball lightning. Temperature inversions. Nothing fits. I leaned back in the chair. My head was spinning. So what are you saying? That he just vanished? That the clothes appeared out of nowhere? I'm saying we don't have answers. We have evidence that doesn't make sense, and we have a missing person we can't find. But you saw the clothes, you know they were his. That means he was out there, somewhere. I know, but we don't know why or how, or what happened after he left them there. I stood up. I need to see them, the clothes. Can I see them? Garrett hesitated, then he nodded. He stood and led me down the hall to a small evidence room. He unlocked the door and flipped on the light. On a metal table in the center of the room sat a clear plastic bag. Inside were Tomas's clothes. His shirt, his jeans, his boots, all folded neatly. I stepped closer. The shirt was a dark blue work shirt with the company logo on the chest. The jeans were faded. The boots were scuffed but intact. I reached out to touch the bag. Garrett stopped me. I can't let you touch them. They're evidence. Evidence of what? That he got undressed in the middle of the desert? I don't know, but until we figure this out, they stay here. I pulled my hand back. I stared at the clothes. They looked normal. Clean, like they'd just come out of a dryer. but there was something wrong, something I couldn't name. I looked at Garrett. "Where exactly did you find them? I'll show you." We drove out to the rancher's property. It was north of Bluff, off a dirt road that branched from US 191. The land was flat and open, red dirt, sparse brush, a few scattered juniper trees. Garrett parked near a gate and we walked across the pasture. After about 10 minutes, we reached the spot. There was nothing there, just a patch of bare ground marked with a small orange flag. Garrett stopped and pointed. "This is it. The clothes were right here, folded in a stack, boots on the bottom, jeans and shirt on top." I looked around. The land stretched out in all directions. Flat, empty. No tracks, no disturbances, no sign that anyone had been here. "How far are we from the highway?" I asked. "About 3 miles. And you didn't find any footprints? Any trail leading here?" "Nothing. We searched the whole area. If he walked here, he didn't leave a trace." I knelt down and touched the ground. The dirt was hard, dry. It would have taken a clear print if someone had walked on it. But there was nothing. Just smooth dirt and a small circle where the clothes had been. I stood up and looked at the sky. It was clear, blue, empty. I thought about the lights, about the grid, about the column that had taken Tomas. I thought about the voice. "Wait, he comes." "He was here," I said quietly. "But he didn't walk. He was brought here." Garrett looked at me. "What are you talking about?" "The lights. They took him, I saw it. And they left his clothes here as a message. Or a marker, I don't know. But this wasn't him walking out here and stripping down. This was something else." Garrett didn't respond. He just looked at the ground. After a long moment, he said, "Even if I believed you, what would you want me to do? Write in my report that aliens took him, that he was abducted by lights in the sky? I want you to tell the truth. The truth is that I don't know what happened, and without a body or a witness or evidence that makes sense, I can't close this case. It stays open. We keep looking. But I'm not going to write a report about lights in the sky. No one will take it seriously." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. But I knew he was right. No one would believe it, not without proof. And I didn't have proof. Just my word. Just my notes. Just a burned image in my memory of Tomas standing in a column of light. We drove back to the station. Garrett walked me to my truck. He leaned against the door and crossed his arms. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. "I don't know. Go back to Flagstaff, I guess. Try to move on. That's probably for the best. You've done everything you can. Sometimes we don't get answers. Sometimes people just disappear. It's hard, but it happens." I nodded. I got in my truck and started the engine. Garrett stepped back. I rolled down the window. "If you find him," I said, "call me. No matter what, I need to know. I will." I drove back to Bluff. I packed my things from the motel. I checked out. I sat in the parking lot with my truck idling and looked at the highway stretching south. I could go home. I could go back to work. I could pretend this never happened, but I knew I wouldn't. I knew I'd never stop thinking about it. Instead, I drove back to the scene. One last time. I parked on the shoulder where Tomas's truck had been found. I got out and stood on the asphalt. The sun was high. The sky was clear. The desert stretched out in all directions. Quiet, empty, normal. I closed my eyes and listened. The wind, the distant hum of traffic, the faint buzz of power lines. And then I heard it. A voice, quiet, almost inaudible, like a whisper carried on the wind. "He is kept." I opened my eyes. There was no one there, just empty road, empty sky. But I'd heard it. I knew I had. I pulled out my notebook and wrote it down. he is kept. 3 words, not he is gone, not he is dead, he is kept. I got in my truck and drove back to Flagstaff. The whole way I thought about those words. What did they mean? Kept where? Kept by who? Kept why? I didn't have answers, but I knew one thing. Tomas wasn't dead. He was somewhere, and something had him. When I got back to Flagstaff, I went straight to the office. My boss was surprised to see me. He asked about Tomas. I told him the sheriff's office was still investigating. I told him they'd found his clothes, but not him. I told him I didn't know what happened. My boss nodded. He said he was sorry. He said to take as much time as I needed. I didn't take time. I went back to work. I answered calls. I dispatched drivers. I kept the freight moving. But every night, I thought about Tomas. About the lights. About the voice. Wait, he comes. He is kept. 3 months passed. The case stayed open. The sheriff's office kept looking. They found nothing. Tomas's family held a memorial service. They asked me to speak. I did. I told them he was a good driver, a good man. I told them I was sorry. I didn't tell them about the lights. I didn't tell them about the voice. They wouldn't have believed me. In January, I got a call from Garrett. He said they were closing the case, not officially, but they were moving it to inactive status. They'd exhausted all leads. They had no new evidence. They had no body. He said he was sorry. I thanked him and hung up. That night, I drove back to Bluff. I don't know why. I just felt like I needed to go. I reached the scene after dark. I parked on the shoulder and got out. The wind was cold. The sky was clear. I looked up and waited. The lights appeared at 9 o'clock. Same formation, same altitude. They moved across the sky and stopped above me. They descended to 500 feet and hung there. The hum started. The pressure built in my chest, and I heard the voice. He is well. He is changed. He will not return. I stood there shaking. Tears ran down my face. "Where is he?" I shouted at the sky. "Where did you take him?" The lights pulsed. Once, twice, 3 times, and then they rose, fast, straight up, and blinked out. The hum stopped, the pressure vanished, and I was alone again. I got in my truck and drove back to Flagstaff. I didn't go back to Bluff after that. I didn't chase the lights. I didn't look for answers. I just accepted what I'd been told. Tomas was gone. He was kept. He was changed. And he wasn't coming back. I quit my job 6 months later. I couldn't dispatch drivers anymore. I couldn't send them out on routes through the desert. I couldn't stop thinking about what might happen to them. I moved to Phoenix. I found work in a warehouse. I don't drive at night anymore. I don't look at the stars. But sometimes when the sky is clear and the wind is calm, I hear it. The voice. Quiet. Distant. Wait, he comes. He is kept. And I know that somewhere out there, beyond the lights and the desert and the empty highways, Tomas is still out there. Not dead. Not lost. Just kept. The nightmares started in February. Always the same. I'm standing on the shoulder of US 191. The sky is black. No stars, no moon. Just empty darkness pressing down like a weight. I hear the hum, feel the pressure in my chest. And then the lights appear. Not 3 this time. Hundreds. Thousands. They fill the entire sky in a grid so perfect it looks like graph paper. And in the center of the grid, suspended in a column of white light, is Tomas. He's looking at me. His mouth is moving. But I can't hear what he's saying. The hum drowns everything out. I try to walk toward him. My legs won't move. I try to call out. My voice won't come. And then the grid begins to collapse. The lights converge on the center, on Tomas, and he screams. Silent, soundless, a scream I feel in my bones but never hear. Then I wake up. I started seeing a therapist in March, a woman named Dr. Reyes who specializes in trauma. I didn't tell her about the lights, not at first. I just told her I'd lost someone, that I'd witnessed something I couldn't explain, that I couldn't sleep. She prescribed medication. It didn't help. The nightmares got worse. After the 4th session, I broke down. I told her everything. The lights, the voice, the column, the way Tomas had vanished. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set down her notepad and looked at me. "Do you believe what you saw was real?" she asked. "Yes. And you understand that what you're describing is extraordinary. I know how it sounds. I'm not questioning your experience. I'm asking if you've considered other explanations. Stress, exhaustion, grief. Sometimes our minds create narratives to help us cope with loss. I wasn't grieving when I saw the lights the first time. I didn't even know Tomas was missing yet. And I saw them 14 nights in a row, always at the same time, always in the same formation. That's not my mind making things up. That's a pattern." Dr. Reyes was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What do you want to happen, Lucy? Do you want to find him? Do you want closure? Or do you want permission to move on?" I didn't know how to answer. I wanted all of those things, and none of them. In April, I got a call from Tomas's sister, Maria. She'd gotten my number from the freight company. She said she was cleaning out his apartment in Cortez and found something she thought I should see. I drove up the next day. Maria met me at a coffee shop on Main Street. She was in her early 40s with dark hair and tired eyes. She handed me a small notebook, leather-bound, worn at the edges. "I found this in his nightstand," she said. "He didn't show it to anyone. But after what happened, I thought, I don't know, maybe it means something." I opened the notebook. The first few pages were normal. Mileage logs, fuel receipts, notes about delivery times. But starting about 3 months before he disappeared, the entries changed. Short phrases, fragments, all in Tomas's handwriting. "Lights over Monument Valley, 3 in formation, watched for 10 minutes, didn't move like planes. Same lights, Mexican hat, closer this time. Felt pressure in chest, had to pull over. Dreamed about standing in white light, couldn't move. Voice said, soon. Lights followed me from Cayenta to Bluff. Stopped when I stopped. Left when I reached town." I flipped through the pages. Entry after entry. Dates, times, descriptions. The last entry was dated October 11th, the day before he disappeared. They're waiting for me, I know they are. I can feel it when I drive that route, like something is pulling me. I don't know if I should be scared or grateful. Maybe both. I looked up at Maria. She had tears in her eyes. "Did he ever tell you about this?" I asked. "No, he never said anything. But looking back, I remember things. He seemed distant the last few months, distracted. He'd stand outside at night and stare at the sky for hours. When I asked him what he was looking at, he'd just say nothing and come back inside. I thought he was depressed. Now I don't know what to think." "Can I keep this?" "Yes. I made copies. But I wanted you to have the original. You were the last person he talked to before whatever happened. I thought you should know he saw them too, that you weren't alone." I thanked her. We talked for another hour. She told me about Tomas, about their childhood in Cortez, about how he'd always loved driving, how he'd say the empty roads made him feel free, how he'd never been afraid of being alone. Until the end. I drove back to Phoenix with the notebook on the passenger seat. I read it again that night. Cover to cover, every entry, every detail. And I realized something. Tomas had known. He'd known something was coming for him. And he'd kept driving that route anyway. Not because he was reckless, but because part of him wanted to go. That realization changed everything. I'd spent months thinking he'd been taken against his will. Abducted. Stolen. But the notebook told a different story. He'd been chosen. And somewhere in those final weeks, he'd chosen to accept it. I started researching. Not lights in the sky, not UFO sightings, but disappearances. Specifically, disappearances in southern Utah along that stretch of highway. I found more than I expected. Earl had been right. Over the past 30 years, at least 7 people had vanished in that area. 3 hikers, 2 campers, a motorcyclist, and now Tomas. All of them disappeared without a trace. All of them were found with some of their belongings left behind. Folded clothes, a backpack, a helmet, always arranged neatly. Always in remote locations with no tracks leading to or from the site. I found one case from 1998, a hiker named David Mills. He'd been camping near the San Juan River. His tent was found intact. His sleeping bag was inside. His boots were placed outside the tent, side by side, laces tied. But David was gone. The search lasted 2 weeks. They found nothing. The case was never solved. I found another from 2006. A woman named Patricia Salazar. She'd been driving from Durango to St. George. Her car was found on the shoulder of US 191. Engine off, keys in the ignition. Her purse was on the passenger seat. Her shoes were placed neatly on the driver's seat. She was never found. The pattern was clear. People disappeared. Their belongings were left behind. Always organized. Always deliberate. As if someone was leaving a marker. A sign that said, "This person was here, and now they're not." I compiled everything into a folder. Newspaper articles, police reports, missing person flyers. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I needed to document it. I needed to prove that Tomas wasn't the first, and he probably wouldn't be the last. In June, I received an anonymous email. The subject line was empty. The message was short. "Stop looking. He is kept. He is well. He cannot return. You cannot follow. Let him go." I stared at the screen. My hands were shaking. I checked the sender. No name, just a string of random letters and numbers. I tried to reply. The message bounced back. Address not found. I printed the email and added it to my folder. I didn't know who sent it, but I knew it wasn't a person. Not a human person. It was them. The ones who took Tomas, the ones who left the voice in the desert. They were watching me. They knew I was still looking, and they were telling me to stop. I should have listened. I should have closed the folder, deleted the files, moved on with my life. But I couldn't, because buried in that message was something I needed to hear. He is well. Not dead. Not suffering, well. And that meant something. I'm writing this down because someone needs to know. If you drive through southern Utah at night, be careful. If you see 3 lights in a triangle formation, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't watch. Don't wait. Because if you do, you might hear the voice. And if you hear the voice, you might see what I saw. And if you see what I saw, you might not come back. Tomas didn't come back. His clothes were found 3 miles from his truck, folded neatly on the ground. No tracks, no trail, no explanation. The case is still open, but no one's looking anymore. No one except me. And I'm not looking to find him. I'm looking to understand why he was taken. What kept means. What changed means. Why the lights chose him, I don't have answers. I don't think I ever will. But I know one thing. Something is out there in the Utah desert. Something that moves in straight lines and speaks in whispers. Something that takes people and leaves only their clothes behind. Something that says wait, and he comes, and he is kept. I waited. He didn't come. But the voice did. And it told me everything I needed to know. Tomas is gone. Not to death. Not to the desert. But to somewhere else. Somewhere beyond the lights, somewhere I can't follow. That's my ending. I stopped looking. I moved on. I changed my life. But I'll never forget the night I saw him standing in that column of light. Small. Fragile. Human. And then gone. Taken by something I'll never understand. Kept by something I'll never see again. If you're reading this and you drive the routes between Flagstaff and Salt Lake, be careful at night. Keep your eyes on the road. Don't watch the sky too long. And if you see 3 lights in a triangle formation moving slow and steady across the darkness, don't stop. Don't wait, just drive. Because waiting means losing time. And losing time means losing everything. That's what happened to Tomas. He waited. And now he's kept. And I'm the only one who knows. My name is Sam Riley. I've lived in Hanksville, Utah for 11 years. The town sits at the junction of Highway 24 and Highway 95, surrounded by red rock desert and empty sky. Population hovers around 200 depending on the season. We have 1 gas station, 1 grocery store, 1 diner, and a scattering of homes and trailers spread along the main road. Most people passing through don't stop except for fuel. The ones who do stop don't stay long. That's how we like it. I run the maintenance for the town's small power grid. It's not a complicated job. We have 2 generators that feed the essential buildings and a handful of homes that opted into the municipal system. Most folks out here rely on solar or their own generators. The grid goes down maybe twice a year, usually when monsoon winds knock debris into the lines, or when equipment overheats in the summer. I can fix most problems in under an hour. Claire Dunn is the closest thing Hanksville has to law enforcement. She's a county sheriff's deputy based out of our small substation. She covers a territory that includes Hanksville, the surrounding desert, and the roads leading to Capitol Reef and Glen Canyon. She's been here 6 years. She's good at her job. Quiet, observant. She doesn't talk much, but when she does, people listen. On November 3rd, everything changed. The day started normal. Cold morning, clear sky. I checked the generators around 8 a.m. Both were running clean. Fuel levels good, no unusual sounds. I logged the readings and went home. My place sits on the east edge of town, a single-wide trailer with a small shed for tools. I spent the afternoon winterizing my truck and replacing a cracked hose. By sunset, the temperature had dropped into the low 40s. I made dinner, watched an old western on a DVD player, and went to bed around 10 p.m. I woke up at midnight to complete darkness. No glow from the clock. No hum from the refrigerator. No light seeping through the curtains from the street lamp outside. I sat up and waited for my eyes to adjust. The silence was total. Not just the absence of electrical noise. Everything. No wind, no distant traffic, no dogs barking. Just silence. I got dressed and grabbed my flashlight from the nightstand. I stepped outside. The air was cold and still. The sky was full of stars, but something felt wrong. I couldn't name it. Just a pressure in my chest that made breathing feel deliberate. I walked to my truck and turned the key. The engine turned over but didn't catch. I tried again. Same result. The battery was fine. The starter clicked. But the engine wouldn't fire. I left the truck and walked toward the center of town. My flashlight beam looked weak against the dark. Every building was black, no lights in windows, no generators running. The gas station sign was dark. The diner was dark. Even the homes with solar setups showed no light. I'd never seen the town this dead. I reached the generator shed behind the old community center. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and shined my light inside. Both generators were silent. I checked the fuel lines, full. I checked the oil, clean. I hit the manual start on the first unit, nothing. I tried the second, same result. The engines wouldn't turn over. No click, no sputter, just dead weight. I stood there trying to make sense of it. Both generators failing at the same time was unlikely. Both generators and my truck failing at the same time was impossible. I pulled out my phone to call Claire. The screen was black. I pressed the power button, nothing. The phone was dead. Not low battery, dead. That's when I heard the sound. A low hum, distant, coming from above. I stepped out of the shed and looked up. The sky had changed. The stars were still there, but between them, the black had shifted to a deep red. Not the red of sunset, not the glow of distant fire. A dark, arterial red that seemed to pulse. It filled the spaces between stars like someone had poured ink into water. The hum grew louder. I felt it in my teeth, in my sternum. My ears popped. I took a step back and my boot hit something. I looked down. Claire was standing behind me. I hadn't heard her approach. She had a flashlight in one hand and her radio in the other. Her face was pale. "The whole town is out," she said. "I know. The generators are dead. My truck won't start. My phone won't turn on. Same. Everything electronic is gone. Even my watch stopped." She held up her wrist. The digital display was blank. I looked at my own watch. Analog. The hands were still moving. It read 12:17 a.m., I showed her. "Mine stopped at 12:17, she said. "Exactly." I looked back at the sky. The red had deepened. The hum was constant now. Claire followed my gaze. "What is that?" she asked. "I don't know." We stood there watching. The red spread like a stain. It moved across the sky in slow waves, swallowing stars as it went. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath. Claire's flashlight flickered, then mine. Both beams dimmed and died. The batteries weren't dead. The lights just stopped working. The hum shifted in pitch. Lower, deeper. I felt it in my bones. Claire grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight. I didn't pull away. The red above us brightened. Not a glow, a presence. Like something massive was pressing down on the atmosphere. I couldn't see a shape. Just the color. Deep. Absolute, consuming. And then it stopped. The hum cut out. The red faded. In the space of 3 seconds, the sky went back to black. Stars reappeared. The pressure in my chest lifted. My ears popped again. Claire let go of my arm. We stood there breathing hard, staring up at nothing. "Did that just happen?" she asked. "Yeah." "What was it?" "I don't know." We walked back toward the center of town. My flashlight worked again. So did hers. We checked houses, knocked on doors. People came out confused and scared. Everyone had the same story. Everything electronic had died at the same time. Digital watches stopped at 12:17. Phones were dead. Vehicles wouldn't start. And everyone had seen the red sky. Old man Garrett, who lives in a trailer near the diner, said his battery-powered radio had gone silent mid-sentence. When the red faded, the radio came back on. But the station had changed. He said it was playing a tone. A single, steady tone. No words. No music. Just a note that made his dog whine and pace. A woman named Iris, who runs the grocery store, said her wind-up alarm clock had stopped. Not the battery clocks, the mechanical one, the kind that doesn't need power. It had stopped at 12:17 and wouldn't restart no matter how much she wound it. We gathered about 30 people in the community center. Claire and I tried to make sense of it. We had no power, no vehicles, no communication, and a sky that had turned red for reasons none of us could explain. Claire said she'd walk to the substation and try the emergency radio. It was hardwired to a backup battery system. If anything still worked, that would. I went back to the generator shed. I wanted to try the manual start one more time. When I got there, the first generator was running. I hadn't touched it, I hadn't turned a key or flipped a switch. It was just running, smooth, steady, like nothing had happened. I checked the second unit, also running, both generators humming at normal operating speed. I checked my watch, 12:53 a.m. I ran back to the community center. The lights were on. People were standing in the doorway looking confused. Iris said her wind-up clock had started again on its own. Garrett said his radio was back to normal. No more tone. Just the usual late-night talk show. Claire came walking up from the substation. She was holding her radio. It was working. She called dispatch in Hanksville and got through. She reported the outage and the red sky. The dispatcher said they'd received no other calls, no reports of power outages, no reports of unusual phenomena, just Hanksville. We sent people home. Claire and I stayed at the community center. We didn't talk much. We just sat at a table with cold coffee and tried to process what had happened. At some point, I checked my phone. It was working. Full battery, no missed calls, no messages, like it had never died. Claire checked hers. Same thing, she looked at me. "This doesn't make sense," she said. "I know. Everything failed at the same time. Everything came back at the same time. And the sky turned red. That's not weather. That's not equipment failure. That's something else. I know. So what do we do? I don't know." We sat there until the sun came up. Neither of us slept. When first light started to silver the horizon, we walked outside. The town looked normal. The generator shed hummed in the background. A few trucks were moving on the highway. The gas station was open. It was like the night had never happened. Except everyone's watch still read 12:17. Every digital clock in town. Every battery-powered alarm. Every phone that had been turned off during the event. They all showed the same time. 12:17. And no matter how many times people reset them, some would drift back to that number within hours. Claire filed a report. She sent it to the county sheriff's office. They said they'd look into it. A week later, they called back and said they'd found no evidence of unusual activity. No power surges. No atmospheric anomalies. No radar contacts. They suggested mass equipment failure due to a temperature inversion or electromagnetic pulse from a distant lightning strike. Claire didn't argue. She just filed the report and moved on. But she didn't move on. Neither did I. We started noticing things, small things, the way the air felt at night, heavier, thicker, the way sounds carried differently. Voices seemed muffled, engines sounded distant even when they were close, and the silence, the same total silence that had come before the red sky. It started happening every few nights, just for a few minutes. Then everything would go back to normal. People stopped talking about it. Not because they forgot, but because talking about it felt wrong, like naming it would make it real. So we went about our lives. I checked generators. Claire ran patrols. The town kept turning, but at night when I lay in bed and listened to the silence, I'd feel it, the pressure, the hum, and I'd know something was still out there, watching. waiting. And what happened on November 3rd wasn't the end. It was the beginning. In the days following November 3rd, I started keeping a detailed log. Not just maintenance records. Everything. Temperature readings throughout the day, the behavior of animals, the quality of light at different hours. Small changes that most people wouldn't notice, but I noticed. The shadows fell differently now. They were longer in the morning, shorter at noon, but not in the way they should be for early November. It was like the angle of the sun had shifted by a few degrees. Claire noticed it too. She mentioned it one morning over coffee at the diner. She said she'd been using the sun's position to orient herself on patrol for years. But after November 3rd, her internal compass felt off. She'd find herself expecting the sun to be in one position and finding it somewhere else. Just slightly, but consistently. The animals behaved strangely. Dogs wouldn't go outside after dark. Cats stayed hidden. The ravens that usually circled over the gas station were gone. I asked Garrett about his horses. He said they were spooked. Wouldn't leave the barn at night. Would pace and whinny until dawn. He'd owned horses for 40 years. He'd never seen them act like this. People in town started having trouble sleeping. Not all at once. Gradually. First, it was Iris. She said she'd wake up at exactly 12:17 every night. Wide awake, heart racing. She'd lie there for 17 minutes. Then she'd fall back asleep like nothing had happened. Then others reported the same thing. Different times, but always 17 minutes past the hour. 1:17, 2:17, 3:17. The pattern was consistent. I started waking up at 3:17 every morning. On the dot. I'd open my eyes and check my watch. 3:17. Every time. I'd try to go back to sleep. But for exactly 17 minutes, sleep wouldn't come. My mind would be alert, racing, thinking about things I couldn't quite remember when I finally drifted off again. Claire experienced it at 5:17. She'd be in deep sleep. Then suddenly awake, fully conscious. She said it felt like something was pulling her out of sleep. Not violently, just insistently. Like someone tapping her shoulder. Wake up. Pay attention. Watch. The numbers started appearing everywhere. On receipts, the total would come to $17.17. License plates on passing vehicles had 17 in them, more than probability would suggest. I started counting. In one day, I saw the number 17 on 23 different vehicles. That's not normal distribution. That's not coincidence. Claire pulled me aside one afternoon. She showed me her patrol log. Over the past week, she'd responded to calls at 9:17 a.m., 11:17 a.m., 2:17 p.m., 4:17 p.m., and 7:17 p.m. every single call, exactly 17 minutes past the hour. She said she'd never noticed a pattern like that before. Calls usually came randomly throughout the day, but this week they were all landing on 17. I checked my own logs. Maintenance calls, equipment checks, supply deliveries. Every single timestamp had 17 in it, either the minute or as part of the hour. It had been happening all week. I just hadn't noticed until now. We sat in her patrol car and tried to make sense of it. She pulled out a notebook and started listing everything we knew. The power outage on November 3rd at 12:17. The red sky. All digital clocks stopping at 12:17. The awakening pattern at 17 minutes past various hours. The appearance of 17 in daily life. She looked at the list. This isn't random. This is deliberate. Something is using this number as a signature, or a marker, or a frequency. Frequency? I asked. Yeah, like a radio signal. Everything operates on a frequency. Maybe 17 is the frequency they're using, the channel they're broadcasting on, and we're starting to pick it up. I thought about that. It made a kind of sense, not scientific sense, but intuitive sense. Like something was tuning us, adjusting our awareness to match a signal we'd never noticed before. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I lay in bed and waited for 3:17. When it came, I was already awake. I sat up and looked around my trailer. Everything looked normal, but it felt different. The air felt thicker, heavier, like the pressure had increased. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the street was empty. The stars were bright. And standing at the far end of the road, barely visible in the darkness, was a figure. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside. The cold hit me immediately. Below 30 degrees. The figure didn't move. I started walking toward it. My boots crunched on gravel. My breath came out in clouds. The figure stood perfectly still. I got within 50 yards. It was tall, thin, wearing dark clothing that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. I called out, "You need help?" No response. I took another step. The figure turned its head toward me, not its body, just its head. The movement was wrong, too smooth, too fluid, like it wasn't bound by the same physical limitations as a human neck. I stopped. My flashlight beam hit it directly. The light didn't reflect. It just disappeared into the figure like it was falling into a hole. I stood there for what felt like a long time, neither of us moving. Then the figure raised one arm, slowly, deliberately. It pointed at me, held the position for several seconds. Then it pointed at the ground, then back at me, then at the ground again. It was showing me something, telling me something, but I didn't understand. The figure lowered its arm. It turned its whole body, not in sections, all at once, like it was rotating on a platform. And then it walked away into the darkness. I tried to follow, but after 3 steps it was gone, just gone. No footsteps, no retreating figure, nothing. I walked to where it had been standing. There were no footprints. The ground was undisturbed, but I felt something, a residual presence, like the air itself remembered something had been there. I checked my watch. 3:34. Exactly 17 minutes had passed. I went back inside. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, I told Claire. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You're the 3rd person to report seeing one this week. Garrett saw one in his pasture. Iris saw one outside her store. They both said the same thing. Tall, thin, dark clothing, movements that don't look right. And they all saw them at 17 minutes past an hour." "What are they?" I asked. "I don't know, but they're connected to everything else. The outage, the number, the red sky, it's all part of the same thing, and it's escalating." She was right. On November 10th, exactly 1 week later, it happened again. I was at the diner having dinner. Claire was there too, sitting at the counter. Around 8 p.m., the lights flickered. Not a brownout, a flicker, like someone had tapped the bulb. Everyone stopped eating. We all looked up at the same time. The light steadied, and then the silence came. Total. Immediate. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The buzz of the overhead lights went quiet. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. I looked at Claire. She was staring at her coffee cup. The liquid inside was vibrating, tiny ripples spreading from the center. I looked at my water glass. Same thing. The windows rattled, not from wind, from pressure. Like the building was inside a bell that had just been struck. I stood up, so did Claire. We walked to the door and stepped outside. The sky was red again, deeper this time. The hum was back, louder. It made my vision blur at the edges. People came out of the diner behind us. We stood in the street and watched the sky pulse. The red moved in waves, expanding and contracting, like something was breathing. I checked my watch, 8:17 p.m. The hands were moving, but they felt slow, like time itself had thickened. Claire pulled out her phone. The screen was black. She pressed the power button, nothing. She looked at me. It's happening again. I tried my phone. Dead. I tried my truck. The engine wouldn't turn over. The generators were silent. Every building was dark, and the red sky pressed down like a hand. This time, it lasted longer. 10 minutes. 15. The hum climbed in pitch until it felt like my skull was going to split. People covered their ears. Some dropped to their knees. A kid started crying. His mother held him and whispered things I couldn't hear over the noise. And then it stopped. The hum cut out. The red faded. The sky went black. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was working. The time read 8:33 p.m. 16 minutes had passed. I looked around. Everyone was checking their devices. Everyone had the same confused look, like we'd just woken up from a dream we couldn't quite remember. Claire walked over to me. We need to figure out what this is. How? I don't know. But it's not random. It happened at 12:17 last week. It happened at 8:17 tonight. That's not a coincidence. What does 17 mean? I don't know, but we need to find out. We went back to the substation. Claire pulled up every report she'd filed in the past year. Missing persons, animal deaths, strange lights, unusual sounds, anything that might connect. I went through maintenance logs, power outages, equipment failures, anomalies in the grid. We worked through the night. At 4 a.m., Claire found something. 3 months ago, on August 17th, she'd responded to a call about lights over the desert west of town. A camper had reported seeing red lights hovering above the ground. They hadn't moved like aircraft. They hadn't made a sound. Claire had driven out to investigate. She'd found nothing, no tracks, no debris, no evidence of anything unusual. She'd filed it as a visual anomaly and moved on. I found something too. On May 17th, both generators had shut down simultaneously for exactly 17 seconds. I'd noted it in the log as a power fluctuation, but looking back, I realized there had been no storm, no wind, no reason for both units to fail at the same time. They'd just stopped, and then started again. 17 seconds later. Claire looked at me. It's been happening all year. We just didn't see the pattern. What's the pattern? The 17th, every month. Something happens on the 17th, lights, sounds, equipment failures, and now this. Full events on November 3rd and November 10th. Why? I don't know, but I think whatever's doing this is building to something. And I think it's going to happen again. She was right. On November 17th at 12:17 a.m., it happened again. This time, the red sky lasted 34 minutes, exactly double the second event. And when it ended, people started reporting missing time, gaps in memory, periods where they couldn't account for what they'd been doing. Claire interviewed them. They all said the same thing. They remembered the red sky. They remembered the hum. And then nothing, a blank space. And then everything was normal again. I started having the dreams. Every night. The same dream. I'm standing in the desert outside Hanksville. The sky is red. The hum is so loud I can't think. And something is descending. Not a craft, not a shape, just a presence. Massive. Incomprehensible. It gets closer and closer until I can feel it pressing against my skin. And then I wake up. Claire was having them too. She told me over coffee at the diner. She said in her dreams, she's standing on the highway. The red sky fills her vision. And she hears a voice. not words. Just a sound that feels like language. Like something is trying to communicate, but the message is too big for her mind to hold. She said she wakes up with nosebleeds, small ones, just a few drops, but consistent. Other people in town reported the same. Dreams, nosebleeds, missing time. And the number 17 appearing everywhere, on receipts, on license plates, on clocks that had been reset but drifted back to 1217. It was like the town was being marked, tagged, prepared for something. On November 24th, the sheriff's office sent an investigator, a man named Hollis. He was in his 50s, overweight, with a skeptical look that never left his face. He spent 2 days interviewing people. He examined the generators. He reviewed Claire's reports. At the end of the second day, he sat with us at the diner and delivered his conclusion. Mass hysteria, he said. You've got a small isolated community experiencing stress from environmental factors. The outages are coincidental. The red sky is likely dust illuminated by distant lightning or industrial activity. The missing time is psychological. People convincing each other that something unusual is happening when it's really just normal desert life. Claire stared at him. You think 50 people imagined the same thing? At the same time? I think 50 people influenced each other. Once one person reports seeing something, others start seeing it too. It's well documented. What about the equipment, the generators, the vehicles? Electromagnetic interference. Could be a lot of things, solar flares, underground mineral deposits. I've seen it before. And the number 17? Confirmation bias. You're looking for a pattern, so you find one. If you were looking for the number 23, you'd find that too. He left the next morning. Claire watched his truck disappear down Highway 24. She looked at me. He didn't see it. No. He thinks we're crazy. Probably. What do? We wait, and we watch. Because whatever this is, it's not done with us. December arrived with cold nights and empty roads. Tourist season was over. The few RVs that passed through didn't stop. The town settled into winter mode. Quiet. Still. Waiting. Claire and I kept track of dates. December 3rd passed without incident. So did December 10th. We thought maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had been happening had moved on. We were wrong. On December 17th, at exactly 5:17 p.m., every light in town went out. Not a flicker. Not a fade. Instant darkness. I was in my trailer. The sun had already set. One moment I was watching TV. The next moment I was sitting in complete black. I stood up and reached for my flashlight. It didn't work. I tried my phone. Dead. I tried the lighter I keep on the table for candles. It wouldn't spark. Not out of fluid. It just wouldn't make a flame. I walked outside. The cold hit me immediately. Below, freezing. My breath came out in clouds I could barely see. The street was dark. Every building was dark. But the sky wasn't red this time. It was black. Darker than black. Like a void had opened above the town. The stars were gone, not hidden by clouds. Gone. I'd lived in the desert long enough to know what a clear night sky looked like. This wasn't clouds. This was absence. I heard footsteps. Claire was walking toward me from the direction of the substation. She had her service weapon drawn, not pointed at anything, just out, ready. She stopped when she saw me. Everyone's power is out, she said. And I mean everyone, even the preppers with off-grid systems. Everything's dead. How long? Started about 3 minutes ago. I was about to come find you. We walked toward the center of town. Other people were coming out of their homes. Flashlights that didn't work. Phones that wouldn't turn on. Vehicles that wouldn't start. The pattern was the same as before, but this time felt different, heavier, more deliberate. We gathered at the community center, about 40 people this time, fewer than before. Some folks had left town after November. They didn't say why, they just packed up and moved on. The ones who stayed were the ones who couldn't leave, the ones who'd lived here too long to start over somewhere else. Claire tried to keep everyone calm. She said it was probably another electromagnetic event, that it would pass like the others. But her voice didn't carry conviction, and everyone knew it. The hum started at 5:34 p.m. Low, deep, rising slowly. I felt it in my jaw, in my spine. People stopped talking. We all listened. It grew louder. The windows rattled. The floor vibrated. And then the temperature dropped, fast. I could see frost forming on the glass. My breath turned to ice crystals in the air. People started shivering. Someone said it felt like 20 below, maybe colder. Claire told everyone to stay inside, to huddle together for warmth. She and I stepped outside. The cold was brutal. It bit through my jacket like it wasn't there. I looked up. The void above us was moving, shifting, like something massive was circling overhead. I couldn't see a shape, just the sense of movement. The stars around the edges of the void flickered, on, off, on, off, like they were being interrupted. The hum changed pitch, higher, sharper. It hurt. I covered my ears. It didn't help. The sound was inside my head. Claire grabbed my arm. She pointed down the street. At the far end of town, near the highway junction, a light had appeared. Not a vehicle, not a building. A column of red light stretching from the ground to the void above. Narrow, precise. It didn't spread, it just stood there like a pillar. We started walking toward it. I don't know why, it felt wrong. But we walked anyway. The cold got worse the closer we got. My hands went numb, my face burned. I couldn't feel my feet. Claire was shaking. Her teeth were chattering. But we kept walking. When we got within 100 yards, we stopped. The column was humming. A different pitch than the background noise. This one was musical, almost a tone. It rose and fell in a pattern, not random, structured, like a signal. Claire pulled out her radio. It was dead, but she held it up toward the column anyway. The speaker crackled, static, then tone, the same musical pattern coming from the column. It was transmitting, broadcasting, calling something. The void above the column began to descend. Slowly. The edges of it pressed down like fabric being pushed from above. The stars around it bent inward. I've never seen anything like it. It was like watching reality fold. Claire grabbed my hand. We need to go. We backed away. Slowly. The column didn't follow, it just stood there. Pulsing. Calling. We made it back to the community center. The cold eased slightly. We went inside. Everyone was staring at us. Iris asked what we'd seen. Claire told them. A red column. A descending void. A signal being broadcast. People looked at each other. No one spoke. At 6:17 p.m., exactly 1 hour after the power went out, everything came back. Lights flickered on, phones buzzed. The generators roared to life. The cold vanished. Not gradually. Instantly. One moment it was sub-zero. The next moment it was 40 degrees. People checked their thermometers. They all agreed. The temperature had jumped 60 degrees in a single second. The column was gone. The void was gone. The stars were back. The sky looked normal, except it didn't feel normal. Something had changed. I could feel it in the air, in the way sound moved, in the way shadows fell. The town felt different, occupied. Claire and I walked the streets that night. We checked every building, every vehicle, every home. Everything looked fine. But we kept finding small things, wrong things. A stop sign that had been facing north was now facing south. A truck that had been parked in front of the diner was now parked behind it. A tree that had been dead for years had green buds on its branches. Small changes, easy to miss, but consistent. People started reporting similar things. Items moved. Clocks running backward for a few minutes before correcting themselves. Shadows that fell in the wrong direction. Claire documented everything. She sent reports to the county. They didn't respond. She called the investigator, Hollis. He said he'd already filed his report. There was nothing more he could do. She called the state police. They said it was a county matter. She called the FBI field office in Salt Lake City. They said to contact the Air Force if she suspected unusual aerial phenomena. She called the Air Force. They said they had no operations in the area. No one wanted to listen. No one wanted to acknowledge that something was happening in Hanksville. We were alone. On December 24th, Christmas Eve, I was closing up the generator shed when I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of town, silhouetted against the desert. It wasn't moving, just standing, watching. I called out. No response. I started walking toward it. It didn't move. I got within 50 feet. It was a person, tall, thin, wearing dark clothing. I called out again. You need help? The figure turned and walked into the desert. Not fast, not slow, just steady. I followed. I don't know why. I just did. It led me about a quarter-mile out, then it stopped. I stopped too. The figure stood there for a moment. Then it turned to face me. I couldn't see its face. The darkness was too thick. But I felt eyes on me. Cold. Appraising. Measuring. The figure raised one arm and pointed at the ground. I looked down. In the dirt, drawn in a pattern I couldn't quite process, was the number 17. Over and over, spiraling out from a center point. Hundreds of them, thousands, covering the ground as far as I could see in the moonlight. The figure lowered its arm. Then it walked away. Into the dark. I tried to follow. It was gone. Just gone. Like it had never been there. I ran back to town. I found Claire at the substation. I told her what I'd seen. She grabbed a flashlight and we drove out to the spot. The numbers were still there, fresh, drawn in the dirt. Claire took photos. She measured the pattern. It was a perfect spiral, mathematically precise. She looked at me. Someone's marking this place, she said. For what? I don't know, but I don't think we want to be here when they come back. We drove back to town. Claire called an emergency meeting at the community center. About 30 people showed up. She told them what we'd found. She said she thought Hanksville was being prepared for something, that the events on the 17th of each month were escalating, that the town might not be safe. She recommended people consider leaving, temporarily, just until things settled down. Most people didn't want to hear it. This was their home. They'd lived here for years, decades. They weren't going to be scared off by some lights and cold weather. A few listened. They packed up and left that night. The rest stayed. On December 31st, New Year's Eve, I decided to leave. I packed a bag. I loaded my truck. I was about to pull out when Claire knocked on my window. She asked where I was going. I told her, away, anywhere but here. She nodded. She understood. But she wasn't coming. She said someone had to stay. Someone had to document what was happening, in case anyone ever cared enough to look. I turned off the engine. I unpacked my bag. I stayed, not because I was brave, but because leaving felt worse than staying. And because Claire was right, someone had to witness. On January 3rd, it happened again. At 3:17 a.m., the power went out. The cold came. The void opened. And this time, something came through. Not a craft, not a light, a sound, a voice, deep, resonant, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. But I felt the meaning, the intention. It was calling, announcing, preparing. The voice lasted 17 seconds. Then it stopped. The power came back. The cold vanished. And Hanksville was quiet again. But the quiet was different. It felt watched, inhabited, like something had moved into the spaces between. Claire and I stopped sleeping much. We'd take shifts, one awake while the other rested. We kept logs, detailed notes, photos, audio recordings, everything we could document. We didn't know who it was for. We just knew it needed to be recorded. On January 10th, the figure appeared again, this time in town. Standing in the middle of Main Street at 10:17 p.m., multiple people saw it. Claire approached with her weapon drawn. She called out. The figure didn't respond. She got within 20 feet. The figure raised its hand. Claire stopped. She said later that she couldn't move, like her body had locked up. The figure held its hand up for 17 seconds. Then it lowered it and walked away. Into the dark. Into nothing. Claire could move again. But she was shaking. She said she'd felt something in those 17 seconds. A presence. Vast. Ancient. Indifferent. We knew then that whatever was happening wasn't going to stop. The 17th of each month. The escalating events. The markers. The figures. The voice. It was all leading somewhere. Building towards something. And Hanksville was the focal point. On January 17th, we evacuated. Claire made the call. She went door to door and told people to leave. Some argued, some refused, but most listened. By 4 p.m., the population of Hanksville had dropped from 200 to about 40. The ones who stayed were the stubborn ones, the ones who'd die before they'd leave their land. Claire and I stayed too. We set up in the community center. We had supplies, water, food, batteries, radios. We were ready for whatever was coming at 17 past the hour. At 7:17 p.m., it started. The power died. The cold came, the void opened. But this time was different. The void didn't stay above. It descended, slowly, deliberately. It touched the ground at the center of town, where the figure had stood on Christmas Eve, where the spiral of numbers had been drawn. The void touched down and spread, a circle of absolute blackness, growing, consuming, swallowing buildings, swallowing light, swallowing sound. Claire and I ran. We got in her patrol vehicle. It started. We drove east on Highway 24, away from town, away from the void. We made it about 2 miles before we looked back. The void had stopped growing. It sat at the center of Hanksville like a hole in the world. We could see its edges, perfectly circular, perfectly black. And around those edges, red light pulsed. The same red we'd seen in the sky, but brighter, closer, more real. We sat there watching. Neither of us spoke. We didn't know what to say. After 17 minutes, the void began to recede. It pulled back toward the center, shrinking, condensing. When it reached the size of a single point, it vanished. The lights came back. The town reappeared. Everything looked normal. We drove back, slowly. When we reached the center of town, we stopped. In the exact spot where the void had touched down, there was a mark, burned into the asphalt. A perfect circle, and inside the circle, Carved deep into the road was the number 17. The mark on the asphalt didn't fade. We tried everything. Pressure washing, chemicals, paint. Nothing covered it. The number 17 stayed visible, black, deep, like it had been branded into the earth itself. People who'd left started coming back. Not all of them, but enough. They wanted to see the mark. They wanted to understand what had happened. Claire cordoned off the area with police tape. She took measurements, photographs, samples of the damaged asphalt. She sent everything to the state lab. They returned the samples with a note saying the material showed no signs of heat damage, chemical alteration, or mechanical scoring. The mark was there. But according to their analysis, it shouldn't be. I spent hours staring at that mark, trying to understand it. The number was perfectly formed. The lines were exactly the same width. The depth was consistent. No tool could have made it so precise, not without leaving trace evidence. But there was nothing, just the mark. Perfect. Impossible. Present. Claire brought in a geologist from the university, a woman named Dr. Sarah Martins who specialized in desert geology. She examined the mark with instruments I didn't recognize. She took core samples from the asphalt and the ground beneath. She measured magnetic fields, radiation levels, soil composition. After 3 days of work, she sat with us at the diner and delivered her findings. "The asphalt shows no chemical changes," she said. "No heat signature, no mechanical stress, but the molecular structure has been altered. At the quantum level, the bonds between molecules have been rearranged, like something rewrote the material at its most fundamental level without disturbing the surface." Claire leaned forward. "Is that possible?" "Not with any technology I know of. You'd need to manipulate individual atoms, and to do it over such a large area so precisely, without leaving any other evidence." She shook her head. "I can't explain it. I can document it, but I can't explain it." "What about the ground underneath?" I asked. "Same thing. The soil beneath the mark shows the same molecular rearrangement, down to a depth of approximately 6 feet. Then it stops. The affected zone is a perfect cylinder, 6 feet deep, 20 feet in diameter, with the number carved into the top surface." Claire and I looked at each other. 6 feet. The depth of a grave. I didn't say it out loud, but I thought it, and I could tell Claire was thinking the same thing. Dr. Martins left the next day. She said she'd write up her findings. She said it would likely be published in a journal. She said it might take years for anyone to believe her. Before she drove away, she pulled me aside. "Whatever did this," she said quietly, "it's not human, and it's not done. The patterns in the molecular structure, they're not random. They're repeating. Fractal, like code, like something is still processing, still working. That mark isn't just a symbol, it's active. It's doing something." "Like what?" I asked. "I don't know, but if I were you, I'd leave soon." She drove away. I stood there watching her truck disappear down Highway 24. I thought about her words, active, processing, working. The mark wasn't just evidence of something that had happened. It was a mechanism, a machine, still running. I went back to the generator shed. I needed to think. I needed to be around something I understood. Machines, engines, systems that made sense. But when I got there, I found something that didn't make sense. The generators were running backwards, not the output. The rotation, the internal mechanisms were spinning in reverse, but the power was flowing correctly. The voltage was stable. The frequency was normal. It should have been impossible. Generators don't work backwards. But these were. I shut them down. I opened the housing. I checked every component. Everything looked normal. I restarted them. They ran forward. Normal operation. Normal sound. I stood there trying to understand what I'd seen. Maybe I'd been mistaken. Maybe the stress was affecting my perception. But I knew what I'd seen. The rotation gauges had been moving counterclockwise for just a moment before I'd gotten close enough to really examine them. Then they'd corrected. I started finding other small impossibilities. A stop sign that had been facing north was now facing south, but when I checked the bolts, they showed rust patterns consistent with never having been moved. A tree that had been dead for years had green buds, but the wood was still dead, hard, dry. The buds were growing from dead tissue. A truck that had been parked in front of the diner was now behind it, but the owner swore he hadn't moved it. The keys had been in his pocket all day. Claire was finding the same things. She documented each one. She tried to find rational explanations, but there weren't any. The town was changing. Small changes. Incremental, but consistent. Like reality itself was being edited, adjusted, corrected to match some template we couldn't see. We started comparing notes every night, sitting at the community center with maps and photographs and lists of anomalies. We'd plot them, look for patterns, try to predict where the next change would occur. We found some patterns, changes clustered around the mark, within a quarter-mile radius. The farther from the mark, the fewer the changes. But they were spreading. The radius was growing, slowly but measurably. Claire measured it. She drove a grid pattern through town every morning, marking locations where she found changes. She'd plot them on a map with colored pins. Each day, the outer ring of pins was slightly farther from the center. She calculated the rate. The affected zone was expanding at approximately 17 feet per day. At that rate, the entire town would be inside the zone within 3 months. And we didn't know what happened when the zone covered everything. Would the changes accelerate? Would something else occur? We didn't know, but we knew we needed to document everything before it was too late. I started interviewing people, recording their experiences, their observations. Claire did the same. We gathered testimony from everyone who'd witnessed the events. We created an archive, written logs, audio recordings, photographs, physical samples. We stored it all in a fireproof safe at the substation. We didn't know who it was for, but we knew it needed to exist. People started leaving again, not in a rush, just quietly. One family here, one person there. They'd pack up and go without saying much. The population dropped to 150, then 120, then 100. By February, we were down to 80 people. The ones who stayed were split into 2 groups, the ones who were too stubborn to leave, and the ones like Claire and me who felt obligated to witness whatever was happening. On February 3rd, I found another spiral in the desert. This one was 2 miles south of town, same pattern. Numbers carved into the dirt in a perfect mathematical spiral. Thousands of repetitions of 17. I took Claire out to see it. She documented it. She tried to find a pattern between this spiral and the one from December. She plotted them on a map. 2 points. She drew a line between them. It ran directly through the center of Hanksville, through the mark on the asphalt. On February 10th, we found a 3rd spiral, 3 miles north. Claire plotted it. The 3 points formed a perfect triangle, with Hanksville at the center. She looked at me. They're surrounding us. Who? Whatever's doing this. They're marking territory, setting boundaries, and we're inside. On February 17th, I didn't want to be in town. Neither did Claire. We convinced about 20 others to leave for the day. We drove to Green River, about 50 miles east. We checked into a motel. We waited. At 12:17 a.m., I felt it. The hum. Faint, distant, but present. I looked at Claire. She felt it too. We went outside. The sky above us was normal, clear, full of stars. But to the west, toward Hanksville, there was a glow. Red. Pulsing. It lasted 17 minutes. Then it faded. We drove back at first light. The town was intact. Buildings were fine. The streets were empty but undamaged. We checked on the people who'd stayed behind. About 30 of them. They all reported the same thing. The power had gone out at 12:17. The cold had come. The void had opened. But this time, it hadn't descended. It had just hovered, watching. After 17 minutes, it closed. Everything went back to normal, except for one thing. Every clock in town had stopped. Not at 12:17 this time, at different times, random times. Claire interviewed people. She documented which clock stopped when. When she plotted the times on a timeline, she found the pattern. The times weren't random, they were coordinates, latitude and longitude. Every stopped clock represented a location, and all those locations formed a grid, a perfect geometric grid, centered on Hanksville. We didn't know what it meant, but it felt like mapping, like something was cataloging the area, measuring it, preparing it for something. In March, the figures started appearing more frequently, not just at night, during the day too. Standing at the edges of town, always watching, always still, Claire approached them multiple times. They never responded. They'd just stand there until she got within a certain distance. Then they'd walk away, into the desert, into the rocks, into nothing. Iris saw one standing outside her store at 3 a.m. She'd woken up to use the bathroom and saw it through the window, standing in the street, facing her building. She watched it for 10 minutes. It didn't move. She called Claire. By the time Claire arrived, it was gone. But there were footprints, deep, precise. They led from the street to the desert and then stopped. No trail beyond, just stopped. Old man Garrett found one standing in his driveway at dawn. He grabbed his shotgun and went outside. He said he aimed at it, told it to leave. It didn't move. He fired a warning shot into the air. The figure turned and looked at him. He said the eyes were wrong. Not human, not animal, just dark, empty, reflecting nothing. It turned and walked away. He didn't follow. People stopped going out at night. They locked their doors. They kept lights on. But it didn't matter. The figures appeared when they wanted, where they wanted. They were always watching, always waiting. On March 17th, I woke up at 2 a.m. to find a figure standing at the foot of my bed. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I just lay there staring at it. It stood perfectly still, watching me. I don't know how long it stayed. Time felt wrong, stretched. When I finally could move again, it was gone. My clock read 2:34 a.m. 17 minutes had passed, but it felt like hours. I called Claire. She came over. I told her what happened. She said the same thing had happened to her the week before. A figure in her room, watching, silent. She'd been too scared to report it, thought she was losing her mind. But now she knew she wasn't alone. We started sleeping in shifts at the community center. 4 or 5 of us, keeping watch. The figures never came inside, but they stood outside the windows, looking in, watching. Some nights there'd be 1. Some nights there'd be 5. They never did anything, just watched. On April 3rd, the voice came back. Not through the void, not from the sky, from the ground. A deep rumble that shook buildings and rattled windows. It spoke for 17 seconds, the same language we couldn't understand. But this time I caught something. A feeling, an emotion in the tone, not hostility, not anger. Anticipation, like something was excited, like something was getting ready. Claire called the state police again. She begged them to send someone. Anyone. They said they'd send a unit when they had availability. They never came. On April 10th, the mark on the asphalt changed. The number 17 was still there, but new marks appeared around it. Symbols, geometric patterns, lines and circles and shapes I couldn't name. They formed overnight. No one saw them appear. They were just there when the sun came up. Claire photographed them. She sent the images to a university professor she knew who studied ancient languages. He called her back 2 days later. He said the symbols weren't from any known language, but they had structure, grammar. They were trying to communicate something. He couldn't translate it, but he said it looked like instructions, or a formula, or a map. On April 17th, the town was almost empty, down to 40 people. Most of them too old or too poor to leave. Claire and I tried one more time to convince them. They refused. This was their home. They weren't going to be driven out by something they didn't understand. We respected that. But we prepared. We stockpiled supplies at the community center. We set up a communication system, walkie-talkies that ran on batteries we kept fresh. We created an evacuation plan, and we waited. At 5:17 p.m., it began. The power died. The cold came. The void opened. But this time, it didn't hover. It descended fast. It touched down at the mark, the center of town, and it exploded outward. Not with force, with presence. A wave of darkness that spread through the streets like water. It didn't damage buildings. It didn't hurt people. It just passed through everything. Through walls, through glass, through bodies. When it passed through me, I felt it. Cold, vast, ancient. It wasn't hostile. It was curious. It was examining, learning, taking measure of everything it touched. The wave lasted 17 seconds. Then it reversed. It pulled back toward the center, back into the void. And when it was gone, the void closed. The power came back. The town was normal again. Except we weren't. Everyone who'd been touched by the wave felt it. A change. Like something had been taken or added. We couldn't name it. But we knew we were different. Claire said she felt lighter. Like part of her weight had been lifted. Iris said she felt full. Like something had been poured into her. Garrett said he felt older. Like years had passed in those 17 seconds. I felt watched, not by the figures, not by something outside, by something inside. Like a piece of the void had stayed with me, observing, recording, waiting. Over the next 2 weeks, people started changing. Small things at first. Iris stopped needing sleep. She'd stay awake for days without feeling tired. Garrett's arthritis disappeared. Decades of pain gone overnight. Claire's eyesight improved. She didn't need glasses anymore. I started hearing things, not voices, tones, frequencies. Like the world was humming at levels I'd never noticed before. We documented everything. We took notes. We tried to understand what was happening. But there were no answers. Just changes. Just the slow realization that we'd been marked. Altered, prepared. The nightmares started in February, always the same. I'm standing in the desert outside Hanksville. The sky is red. The hum is so loud I can't think. And something is descending. Not a craft, not a shape. Just a presence. Massive. Incomprehensible. It gets closer and closer until I can feel it pressing against my skin. And then I wake up. Claire was having them too. She told me over coffee at the diner. She said in her dreams, she's standing on the highway. The red sky fills her vision. And she hears a voice. Not words. just a sound that feels like language, like something is trying to communicate but the message is too big for her mind to hold. She said she wakes up with nosebleeds, small ones, just a few drops, but consistent. Other people in town reported the same. Dreams, nosebleeds, missing time, and the number 17 appearing everywhere. On receipts, on license plates, on clocks that had been reset but drifted back to 1217. It was like the town was being marked, tagged, prepared for something. I started carrying a small notebook everywhere, writing down every instance of 17 I saw, every synchronicity, every impossible thing. By the end of February, I had 200 pages filled. Numbers, times, observations, patterns within patterns. I showed it to Claire. She had one too. Hers was thicker, more detailed. She'd been documenting since November. She had over 400 pages. We compared them one night, looking for correlations, for predictions. We found them. The events were following a mathematical progression. Each occurrence was 17 times more intense than the one before. The first event on November 3rd lasted 17 minutes. The second on November 10th lasted 34 minutes. The third on November 17th lasted 68 minutes. If the pattern held, the next one would last 136 minutes. Over 2 hours. We didn't know if the town could survive 2 hours of whatever was coming. On February 17th, we were proven right. The event started at 8:17 p.m. and lasted until 10:33 p.m., exactly 136 minutes. The void opened, the cold came, but this time, things came through. Not physical things, impressions, shadows that moved through walls, sounds that had no source, and the dreams bled into waking life. People saw things that weren't there, or saw things that were there but shouldn't be. The boundary between reality and something else was thinning. Iris told me she saw her deceased husband standing in her store. He'd been dead for 5 years, but there he was, standing by the register, looking at her, not speaking, just looking. She said she could see through him, like he was made of smoke. But he was there, present, real enough to cast a faint shadow. He stood there for exactly 17 seconds. Then he faded. She said it didn't feel scary. It felt sad, like he was trapped somewhere and could only reach through for brief moments. Garrett saw his childhood home. Not a memory. The actual structure. Superimposed over his current trailer. He could see both at once, the walls of his trailer and the walls of the house he grew up in, both occupying the same space. He walked through rooms that shouldn't exist, touched furniture that wasn't there. He said it felt more real than reality, like the present was the illusion and the past was solid. Claire saw herself, a different version, older, standing in the substation, looking back at her. The other Claire was wearing a uniform Claire didn't recognize. Different badge, different patches, like she was from another department or another time. They stared at each other for several seconds. The other Claire raised her hand, made a gesture, a warning. Stop. Go back. Get out. Then she faded. I saw Hanksville as it would be. Empty, abandoned, but still there. Buildings intact but lifeless. Streets clean but silent. No people, no animals, no movement. Just a perfect ghost town, frozen in time, waiting. I walked through this vision, touching walls that felt solid, opening doors that made no sound. And in the center of town, where the mark should be, there was a structure, something new, geometric, crystalline, pulsing with faint light. I tried to approach it, but every step I took kept me the same distance away. Like space itself was bending around it, When the 136 minutes ended and reality snapped back, we gathered at the community center. Everyone who'd experienced visions shared them. We documented everything. Claire recorded it all. We were building a record, a testimony, evidence that something extraordinary was happening, even if no one ever believed it. The changes in people accelerated after that night. Iris stopped needing sleep. She'd stay awake for days without feeling tired. She said she didn't miss it, said she felt more alive than she had in years. Garrett's arthritis disappeared, decades of pain gone overnight. He could move like he did in his youth. Claire's eyesight improved. She didn't need glasses anymore, could see details at distances that should have been impossible. I started hearing things, not voices, tones, frequencies. The world hummed at levels I'd never noticed before. I could hear electricity flowing through wires, could hear the vibration of molecules in the air, could hear something else, a background signal, constant, everywhere, like the universe itself was broadcasting on a frequency I'd suddenly tuned into. We weren't becoming more human. We were becoming something else, something that could perceive more, process more, exist in more dimensions than we'd been limited to before. The changes weren't harmful. They were enhancements, upgrades, like we were being prepared to exist in whatever came next. On March 17th, Claire called me at 2 a.m. Her voice was calm but urgent. "Come to the mark, now. You need to see this." I drove to the center of town. Claire was standing at the edge of the cordoned area. She pointed at the mark. It was glowing, faint, blue-white, pulsing in rhythm with a sound I could barely hear. The same frequency I'd been detecting everywhere, but concentrated, amplified. I stepped closer. The mark wasn't just carved into the asphalt anymore. It was three-dimensional, extending down into the ground and up into the air. A column of structured light and sound. A beacon. "It's calling them," Claire said. "Whatever this is, it's a signal, and they're responding." I looked up. The sky was clear, full of stars. But between the stars, the space looked different. Thicker. Occupied, like something massive was there but couldn't quite be seen. Not yet. We stood there watching until dawn. The glow faded with the sunrise, but the mark remained. Active, broadcasting, waiting for a response. Over the next 2 months, the figures appeared more frequently. Not just at night. During the day, too. Standing at the edges of town. Always watching, always still. Claire approached them multiple times. They never responded. They'd just stand there until she got within a certain distance. Then they'd walk away. Into the desert, into the rocks, into nothing. On May 17th, I made a decision. I was leaving. Not because I was scared, but because I needed to know if the changes would follow me. If whatever had been done to me was permanent, or if distance would break the connection. I told Claire. She understood. She said she was staying. Someone had to keep watching, keep recording, keep witnessing, in case it mattered. I packed my truck. I said goodbye to the few people left. I drove east on Highway 24. I didn't look back. I made it to Green River, then to Grand Junction, then to Denver. The changes stayed with me. The hearing, the sense of being watched, the feeling that something inside me was awake and observing. I tried to ignore it. I found work. I rented a small apartment. I tried to build a normal life. But every night at 17 past the hour, no matter what hour, I'd feel it. A pulse, a connection. Like something was checking in, making sure I was still there, still marked, still part of whatever pattern they were building. Claire and I kept in touch by email. She sent me updates. The population of Hanksville dropped to 25, then 15, then 10. The figures appeared every night now, multiple figures, dozens. Standing in a circle around the mark, watching, waiting. The void opened every 17th of the month. Each time it stayed longer. Each time the changes in people grew stronger. By August, Claire said some people could see in complete darkness. Some could withstand temperatures that should have killed them. Some stopped eating but stayed healthy. The alterations were accelerating. On September 17th, Claire sent me a final email. She said the void had opened at 9:17 a.m. and hadn't closed. It was still there, growing, spreading. She said she was going to stay and watch, to document the end, or the beginning, whichever it was. She said if I never heard from her again, I should tell people what happened in Hanksville. Not because anyone would believe it, but because it needed to be said. She signed it with her name and the number 17. I never heard from her again. I drove back to Hanksville in October. The town was empty. Every building abandoned, every street silent. The mark was still there, in the center of town. But it had changed. It was larger. The number 17 was now carved 20 feet across, and around it, new marks, new symbols, a complete circle of language I couldn't read. I stood at the edge and looked at it. I felt the presence inside me pulse, recognizing, responding. I drove back to Hanksville in October. The town was empty, every building abandoned, every street silent. The mark was still there, in the center of town. But it had changed. It was larger. The number 17 was now carved 20 feet across, and around it, new marks, new symbols, a complete circle of language I couldn't read. I stood at the edge and looked at it. I felt the presence inside me pulse, recognizing, responding. I walked closer, against every instinct, against every rational thought. I walked to the edge of the mark. The air around it vibrated, not with sound, with something else, potential, possibility. I knelt down and touched the surface. It was warm, not hot, but warm like living skin. The symbols around the edge weren't just carved, they were moving, slowly, rotating around the central 17 like planets around a sun. I stood there for over an hour, watching, feeling, trying to understand. The presence inside me was stronger here, more active. Like being near the mark amplified the connection. I closed my eyes and focused on it, on the pulse, on the signal. And for a moment, I understood. The 17 wasn't just a number. It was a coordinate, a frequency, a designation. Hanksville had been chosen, marked, prepared, not for invasion, not for destruction, for something else, for transition. The town hadn't been destroyed. It had been moved, shifted, into a space between. A fold in reality where it could exist in multiple states at once, present but not present, occupied but empty, changed but preserved. The people who stayed until the end hadn't died. They'd gone with it, transitioned, become part of whatever Hanksville had become. And those of us who left carried the mark, the connection. We were anchors, bridges, links between the old reality and the new one. We could still feel it because part of us was still there, in that folded space, in that transformed town. I opened my eyes. The sun was setting. The sky was turning red. Not the deep, arterial red of the void, just normal desert sunset. But for a moment, just a moment, I saw both. The normal sunset and the red sky, overlapping, coexisting. Two versions of the same moment. Then it faded, and I was alone in an empty town as darkness fell. I didn't want to be there when night came, didn't want to see what appeared after dark. I walked back to my truck. As I reached it, I heard something. A voice, faint, distant, coming from the direction of the mark. I turned. There was nothing there, just empty street, empty buildings, empty sky. But I heard it again, clearer this time. My name. Sam. Not threatening, not urgent, just calling, inviting. I stood there with my hand on the truck door. Part of me wanted to go back, wanted to walk into that mark, wanted to see where it led, wanted to understand completely. But the part of me that still clung to this reality, to this version of existence, won. I got in the truck and started the engine. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The town was behind me, dark, silent, but not empty. I could see lights, faint, moving between buildings, not flashlights, not vehicle lights. Something else, the same blue-white glow that had come from the mark, and figures, dozens of them, standing in the streets, watching me leave. Not the dark figures from before. These were different. They looked almost human, almost familiar, like the people who'd stayed, but changed, transformed, existing in that space between. I drove faster, didn't look back again, made it to Highway 24, made it to Green River, made it back to Denver, but I carried it with me, the vision, the understanding, the knowledge that Hanksville wasn't gone, just changed, still there, still existing, just not in a way we were meant to perceive. I left before dark. I didn't want to see what happened at night. I didn't want to know if the void was still there. I just wanted to leave. I drove back to Denver. I filed a report with the state police. They said they'd look into it. They never did. I called the county sheriff. They said the town had been officially listed as abandoned. No foul play suspected, just economic decline. People moving on, normal rural America. I'm writing this 2 years later. It's November 2025. I still live in Denver. I still feel the pulse every night at 17 past the hour. I still hear the tones. I still sense something watching from inside. I've tried to contact others who were in Hanksville during the events. Most don't respond. A few do. They report the same changes, the same sense of connection, the same feeling that we're waiting for something. I don't know what happened in Hanksville. I don't know what the void was. I don't know what the figures wanted. I don't know what the changes mean. But I know this. Something marked that town. Something studied us, altered us, prepared us. And I think it's still out there, still watching, still waiting. Because every 17th of the month at 17 past the hour, I feel it. A pulse, a signal, a reminder that whatever happened in Hanksville isn't over. It's just beginning. If you're reading this and you drive through southern Utah, avoid Hanksville. The town is empty now, abandoned. But the mark is still there. The void might still be there. And if you stop, if you look too long, you might feel what I felt. That pulse, that connection, that sense that something vast and ancient has taken notice of you. And once it has, you can't unfeel it. You can't unhear it. You can't escape it. Claire knew that. She stayed anyway. She chose to witness, to document, to understand. I chose to run. I chose to survive. I don't know which choice was right, but I know that every night when I feel that pulse, I think about her, standing in an empty town, watching a void that wouldn't close, marking down everything she saw, everything she felt, for someone, anyone, who might care enough to listen. That's my ending. I ran. I survived. I'm changed. And I'm still connected to something I don't understand. Something that started in Hanksville on November 3rd when the power went out at 12:17 a.m., and the sky turned red. Something that marked us, measured us, and isn't done with us yet. If you see the number 17 appearing in your life with increasing frequency, pay attention. If you feel a pulse at 17 past the hour, don't ignore it. If figures start appearing at the edges of your vision, watching and waiting, don't dismiss them. Because what happened in Hanksville can happen anywhere. The void can open anywhere. And when it does, you'll have to choose, stay and witness, or run and carry the mark with you forever. I made my choice, and now I'm telling you. So someone knows. So someone remembers. So the silence doesn't swallow everything that happened in that small desert town where time stopped at 12:17 and nothing was ever the same again.